Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 61 of ThROH The Years, the podcast that reviews Ring of Honor, show by show, from the beginning. As always, I'm Trevor Dame. As always, I am joined by the other half of the show, the man who this week informed me that ThROH The Years is the 14th most popular wrestling podcast in all of Denmark, Matt Feuerstein. Matt, I have to admit, both of us are probably, I know I have, walking on air since we learned that. 14th in Denmark.
Isn't it sort of like the sort of stat you'd make up, like, to make fun of a show? Like the Flight of the Conchords are like the third most popular, like, parody folk duo in New Zealand or something. Like, we're the fourth most popular, 14th most popular wrestling podcast in Denmark. So to all of our Danish listeners, thank you so much. It's literally the greatest accolade we will ever achieve in our entire lives. And, there's nothing, it's exceeded my wildest expectations for myself. So thank you so much. And please keep listening.
When the pandemic ends, we will definitely be doing a live show from there. Matt, the only explanation I can have to why we are popular in Denmark is just people quickly scan over and misinterpret my last name Dame as Dane and think, oh, it's a fellow Dane, finally a Danish Ring of Honor wrestling podcast, and then they listen for 5 seconds and get disappointed.
That is true. Although I would probably argue with the distinction that we are, quote, popular in Denmark. But we are the 14th most popular wrestling podcast in Denmark. So
exactly.
Hey.
I'm going to get so many ladies, Matt, now. This is finally the line I drop when I go out to everybody.
You're moving to Copenhagen, stat.
Exactly. If you want to listen to the 14th most popular wrestling podcast in Denmark, as always, we are on the Pro Wrestling Only podcast network, which you can search for by typing in Pro Wrestling Only, with a bunch of other great shows, including like Shimmer Herstory, which, Stephen Graham we've had recently on, and a bunch of other great podcasts on that network. But if you just want us, if you're that weird, if you're Danish and you just love us, we have our own feed on pretty much every podcast provider, Apple, iTunes, whatever. Just type ThROH The Years, ThROH The Years. We have our own feed, and this will now be 61 episodes, so tons of shows. I just got a tweet a couple of days ago saying that someone started listening last spring, and they just got through everything. So, if you start a year ago, this could become a weekly show for you. That's the way the show becomes weekly, if you just start late and then dole it out.
That's exactly right. You would have to be listening to, I guess, the first episode now. So, but go for it. Do it. It'll ruin your life. I feel like our tagline should be like a clip of Krusty the Clown going, "Now that's Danish." You remember that?
Oh, that's good. Anyway, so some news happened between the last Ring of Honor show we covered and this one, and we always like to go through that. So first off, very minor little thing. PW Insider wrote at the time, Jay Lethal will be making his 0-1 debut on March 15th at Korakuen Hall in Tokyo, Japan. And Matt, indeed he did. I looked up, he was in a tag team with C.W. Anderson, another Ring of Honor alumni. According to Cage Match, they only have one match listed for him. I don't know if really Jay Lethal really went to Japan to work 1-0-1 match, but he did work for Japan, so even Jay Lethal, this kind of shows where his career was even launching here, where he was getting, his first tour of Japan, I think.
Maybe he was on vacation, and they were like, hey, want to wrestle?
Also, these things were happening quite frequently at this point, but going to the Pro Wrestling Torch, they wrote, before the March 14th Raw went live, Rhino beat a local wrestler. In heat matches, Viscera beat Simon Dean, Maven and Molly Holly beat Val Venus and Victoria in a mixed tag, and Chris Masters beat Jimmy Rave of Ring of Honor fame. So, it seems like Chris Masters was beating a lot of Ring of Honor guys at this point, which I'm sure was just a coincidence, but it seems like almost a bunch of the shows recently we've had like guys getting catcalls for the fans from losing like Master Lock challenges, and this was another one apparently.
I remember when I went to my first ROH show a few months after this, and someone got somebody in a full Nelson, and someone in the crowd just yelled Master Lock, and I remember getting such a kick out of that because it's the full Nelson, but they may change the name, and that was funny.
Isn't that weird? Like when you're growing up as a wrestling fan, like the first time you see a move and it's a move you know by one name and someone just calls it another name and you're like, you're allowed to do that? Like it feels wrong. Like I remember when I figured out that like growing up as a young Canadian, of course, big Bret Hart fan, that like, oh, someone was doing the sharpshooter before the sharpshooter and it was called the Scorpion Deathlock. And I was like, what? Like, that can't. I felt like my hero had stabbed me in the heart, man. No pun intended.
Yeah,
it was tough.
Yeah, I mean, I was watching Sting a little before Brett started doing the sharpshooter, so I was like, "Wow, you just get to call it your own name? Like that's brash." Bret the Brash Man Hart.
The excellence of executions using somebody else's gun, Matt. It's just upsetting my whole worldview.
And even in the WWF, Ronnie Garvin used it, and I don't even remember if that had a name when he did it.
Huh? I don't even remember that. Wow, I should look into that tonight after the show because that's how exciting my Saturday nights are. So going to the Pro Wrestling Torch again. This is another story we've seen little drips and drabs of the last few episodes, but the Torch wrote, one WWE source told the Torch several weeks ago that the feeling among upper management in WWE is that while they took a look at Samoa Joe and CM Punk on the recommendation of Mick Foley, they felt that both wrestlers had, quote, body issues, unquote. Punk apparently received the same message as he is visibly adding muscle to his body and his look is changing rapidly. He also started wearing tights. Both factors could help him get the WWE job he wants.
Well, it sounds like WWF is the one who gave them body issues.
Yeah, exactly. Isn't it weird that like think of that last sentence, or let me just go the last two sentences. He has also started wearing tights. Both factors could help him get the WWE job he wants. Imagine like one of the two stumbling blocks between someone getting a job with WWE and not is, do they wear tights or basketball shorts? Like, I mean,
it seems like you could probably just hire the guy and tell him to wear the tights.
Exactly.
And that solves that problem right there.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, this was a story we will see more of in the coming months, where Punk obviously gets the WWE job, and Samoa Joe kind of publicly on his blog in a future episode, he kind of goes through a crisis of faith, like being like, why isn't any big company signing me? He has this kind of period between now and when he goes to TNA where he's like, why isn't WWE or New Japan or whatever interested? And he gets pretty down publicly, actually, which, I mean, I would have been down too if I was Joe, because he was one of the most talented wrestlers, in my opinion, in the entire planet at this point, and people were just looking at him and going, not really. Crazy to me.
By the end of 2005, a lot of people were saying Joe was the best wrestler in the world, and probably even at this point, yeah, and it is ridiculous. Like, it's still ridiculous that WWE never signed him until, 2016, 2015? I don't even remember. One of those 2 years. Yeah.
Something crazy like that.
Yeah.
And then we'll get to one of the bigger stories between the last show and this one. Going back again to the PW Torch, the personal websites for AJ Styles and Christopher Daniels announced that both will be working 12 Ring of Honor dates from July through December. The post was soon pulled, and Bill Behrens told the webmaster that the bookings were actually for Ring of Honor regular Jimmy Rave, not Styles or Daniels. Neither Styles nor Daniels are officially set for Ring of Honor dates yet, but it's expected both will work Ring of Honor later this year. The announcement of future dates may have been a mistake, or may have been a premature announcement because Ring of Honor wants to save the official word for special circumstances. Styles told Extreme Mayhem Video that he is thrilled to be returning to Ring of Honor later this year. He said he is proud to have been a big part of the early stages of Ring of Honor, and that Ring of Honor is the place to be. He also said that without the X Division, he doesn't think TNA would be where it is today. He said he'd be proud to eventually be a 16-time X Division champion. Regarding Rob Feinstein, AJ said that everyone has their own problems and he has gotten over it. A short time later, he called Michael Moore a, quote, I'll just say a word that starts with F, that's a derogatory, horrible slang for a gay person.
Oh, and yeah, wait, AJ Styles used that word?
Exactly, I know. It's shocking. And he says that he doesn't like him. Finally, AJ added that he's been reading The Death of WCW, and he's glad Hulk Hogan isn't in TNA.
So he forgives certain accusations, but not Michael Moore.
Yes, Rob Feinstein has his own problems, but he's gotten over it. Michael Moore, not a good person, apparently. Death of W. Although I feel like that last line's almost like the slightest particle of karma, because that last line, like after saying some pretty shitty things, being like, yeah, at least Hulk Hogan isn't in TNA, like. But so going to PW Insider for a little follow up on this. Mike Johnson wrote, "There's a ton of heat on NWA Wildside's Bill Behrens right now over Behrens sending out dates for AJ Styles and Christopher Daniels with Ring of Honor to their respective websites. Behrens handles their outside bookings. The internal feeling in Ring of Honor is that the buzz about their returns, which Ring of Honor's Gabe Sapolsky refused to comment on last weekend, hurt interest for the company's show this past weekend. It's said to be at the point that Sapolsky doesn't want to deal with Behrens right now. If anything, it gave Ring of Honor fans something to look forward to, but it certainly did spoil any surprise." So, Matt, I think the show he was talking about it hurting was this show. I really have a hard time believing that anyone was like, I want to see Ring of Honor come to Connecticut, but AJ Styles is going to come back to the promotion in an indeterminate, like months later. Well, then I don't need to buy a ticket right now. Like, I mean, I don't even think at this point Connecticut until after the show it was booked for a follow-up date. So the idea that, look, I can understand if you're Ring of Honor being pissed off that you want to have these big surprise returns of these guys, you want to control the announcement yourself, and the idea that someone like their agent Bill Behrens just flubbed it and put up all their dates and basically gave it away. I can understand being really pissed off by that. But the idea of saying like that hurt ticket sales for this show, I have a hard time swallowing that.
No, I mean, that's like what Dave Meltzer always talks about, how promoters come up with like a bajillion different excuses for low ticket sales. That one is quite the stretch.
Yeah, but I can completely understand being frustrated and being like,
oh yeah, of
God
course.
damn it, like, why'd you put this on?
For reasons other than the ticket sales on this particular show.
Yeah, and I did love Bill Behrens though trying to cover by saying, those were all dates for Jimmy Ray. Like, good, nice try, Bill, but no, apparently that wasn't the case. But that brings us to the show we are covering tonight proper. It is Ring of Honor Back to Basics. Took place March 12th, 2005 at the CT Sports Center in Woodbridge, Connecticut, in front of a non-Observer reported crowd of 500 fans. This is the rare time where the Observer did not have like any kind of results or recap of this show. I don't know why. I looked over both issues in this time period. It wasn't in either of them. So for once I can't use their thing on this.
No subscribers went to the show, I guess. But by the way, am I correct in this being the first time that this was the fourth straight weekend with an ROH show?
It probably was. I'm horrible with that kind of stuff, but it probably was. I mean, Ring of Honor, this was the year they really were ramping up. Before we go into the show, a couple points. First off, I will just I'll say this at the start and we'll see how it plays out. After this show happened, Gabe Sapolsky told the Torch that this show was one of his favorite Ring of Honor events they had ever done up to this point. So as two people that have just watched
all of the shows.
Yes, we are in a unique position of having this fairly fresh in our minds, even though it's taken us a period of years. But we'll see how that plays out. And then also, Gabe was apparently really happy, not with just how the show turned out critically, but also the crowd and the size of it, because the Ring of Honor Newswire actually reported afterwards, last Saturday's event in Woodbridge, Connecticut was an example of Ring of Honor rewarding the fans for a great response. Ring of Honor entered the show with no intentions of returning to Connecticut. However, after a strong walk-up despite storm warnings, and more importantly, great crowd reactions, Ring of Honor booked a return date on the spot for July 16th. The Connecticut crowd came to have fun and not overanalyze things or yell smart comments to try to get themselves over, and as a result, the guys in the ring fed off that energy and went the extra mile to put on a truly memorable event.
Jeez, I wonder who wrote that.
Ring of Honor officials always say that Ring of Honor will go as far as the fans take it, and this is a prime example of that. Thank you, Woodbridge. Matt, exactly like you were cheekily saying, who could have wrote that? We've heard Gabe multiple times on recent months of this show, like, basically put over certain fans by saying they're not trying to get themselves over, basically implying that other fans in other markets, maybe their more regular markets, are more concerned with putting themselves over, which...
He's not wrong.
I mean, it's not completely wrong, but yeah. I would also say... it's kind of the cost of being popular, because the more you run a certain place, the more demanding those fans get. But I mean, yes, these Connecticut fans might have been less cynical, less jaded, less spoiled, so to speak. But at the same time, there's a reason why they kept running their biggest shows in New Jersey and Chicago and places like that. And Woodbridge, Connecticut did not become the mecca of Ring of Honor. Like, you know, yes, there are jaded fans, but jaded fans are often still, if you scratch beneath that surface, really some of your most hardcore, dedicated, and loyal fans.
Right. They come out and like listen, like I know a lot of people didn't like ROH crowds at the time. I remember getting defensive about it even. But like those crowds, I mean, by and large, ROH crowds made the shows better. Like there were occasions where it didn't always work out that way, but even up until this point, they've had their crowds are good. Like they have good, respectful, and crowds that really appreciate good wrestling most of the time.
I remember one thing early on in the show, we were like, well, when are the annoying chants going to start? And Matt, like, I don't think we've gotten to a point yet, and I thought we would have, like, from my vague memories of this era, of like, a lot of really annoying chants, you know, or like going to more what Gabe says about crowds that seemed to be there more to get themselves over, yell smart comments. And yeah, you occasionally hear something, but I don't think we've gotten to that point yet where we've seen a show yet where the fans have really like derailed the show or made it all about them, or I felt like they were ignoring something that deserved better attention, like on a regular basis.
It was certainly nothing like in 2009 when they had Austin Aries versus Petey Williams, and everyone kept chanting Twinkies every time Todd Sinclair made a count, and Homicide was in the crowd near me, and he was doing it too.
So yeah, like I'm not saying they never get there, but I'm kind of surprised that we've watched, you know, from 2002 on, and we're into 2005, and we haven't reached that point yet. So
yes, and I should clarify. I remember Homicide laughing and enjoying the chants a lot. I can't say 100% that he was actually saying Twinkies, but he definitely was enjoying them.
Don't tease me like that, Matt. God damn it. That was going to be a dream.
We got to ask Justin and Tom Feely, because they were with me, to verify whether or not he was saying Twinkies or just laughing.
Okay. So we open the show backstage with Colt Cabana. He's got his tuxedo t-shirt on. It's time for Good Times, Great Memories, his backstage talk show. Colt is excited about both his matches tonight, because he has two. We'll get into that in a little bit. And introduces his guests, Dunn and Marcos, the Ring Crew Express. Dunn and Marcos say they're rocking like docking. Not the first time I believe they've said that, but always a joy to hear them say that. But
Cabana loved it. He was like, hey, I like that. Like, he stopped them in their tracks to say how much he enjoyed the phrase "rockin' like dockin'."
It was almost like he was surprised they were going to say anything new. He's like, "Hey, you got another line. This is a good bit." But at this point, Nigel McGuinness, his Colt's tag partner for tonight, he walks in. He's annoyed that Colt is screwing around with a talk show when they have a tag title shot tonight. He's also annoyed that Colt is working a singles match earlier on the show, and then he basically kind of badgers Colt into getting up, abandoning the talk show for now, and going out to exercise with him. So just kind of, this is one of, I guess, two, I would argue maybe three storylines that Ring of Honor had at this point between friends that had tension between them. Like, you got Colt and Nigel, you got Spanky and Gibson, although that's being played a little bit less tensiony at this point, and you had Corino CM Punk, which kind of gets its finish its non-finish tonight on this show. So kind of three of these kind of simmering tensions between partners or friends.
Almost like there's a little bit of a rut going on. No, I'm serious though. Like it's not terrible, but like you do kind of get that vibe a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, it's something we don't see that often up to this point, of like basically the same storyline playing out in slightly different ways in triplicate on the same shows. Yeah, that definitely. You know, if that was WWE or something, we would call that out too, which is, you know, if you saw the same exact finish 3 times on a show, you'd be like, that's weird. And right. Yeah, that was booking-wise what was happening here.
Yeah.
We jump to elsewhere backstage where Lacey's version of Special K is hanging out. Deranged is doing a headstand for no reason because this Special K is wacky. Lacey is frustrated with these goofs and says tonight is their chance to win the Special K name. Lacey calls her the smartest businesswoman in Ring of Honor and says they can make a lot of money marketing the Special K name. Lacey then calls out Daisy Hayes and says that in addition to being the smartest businesswoman, she's also the best women's wrestler, and she's going to prove that tonight. and then Deranged falls out of his headstand. So
you got to cross all the storyline points, and that I guess was the only reason for the promo. So I guess they did it. They did their job.
Yeah, and they're kind of hinting at the transfer coming up a little later, which is Lacey becoming more like the businesswoman and less of just one of the raver girls and more of like the serious. She's kind of going to corporate these guys up a bit. That brings us to the opening match of the show. Colt Cabana defeated Delirious via pinfall in 7 minutes, 48 seconds after hitting his spinning crucifix drop, which Gabe on the show calls the Twirly Bird. I don't know if that was the official name or not. Matt, this is a rare match, I thought, in the sense of, I think this is one of the rare times, I'm sure it's happened more than this time, that Colt Cabana is kind of playing the straight man in a comedy match.
Right, I wrote the same thing. It's interesting to see him on like the receiving end of the comedy spots.
Yeah, so what did you think about it?
It was okay. It wasn't like it never got out of first gear. It wasn't like a hot opener. They clearly went for like a fairly low key kind of an opening match. But I was happy to see Delirious, I think, making it to the East Coast for the first time, at least on a main show, right? He had never been on a non-Midwest show as far as I can remember. But they did like their little comedy spots. Delirious did his little like turtle defense move, so Cabana put him on the turnbuckle, and he responds with a quote lizard pose on the top rope. Delirious does his little this telephone cradle thing. And then at a certain point, Colt is mad that Delirious keeps telling the ref that Colt pulled his mask in tight, so he turns to the crowd and does a jerk-off hand motion. So is Cabana, is that a comedy spot, or is Cabana getting frustrated and serious? Delirious goes for what looked like almost a Styles clash, and that's when Cabana escaped and did the twirly bird. It was just okay. I don't know. I feel like I probably would have expected actually a little bit more entertainment from this one, honestly.
I think I like this a little bit more than you. I thought it was like above average as a comedy opener. I think it's probably, if I just watched a bunch of Delirious, which I haven't been watching a bunch of Delirious, the novelty would kind of wear off because there's a lot of the spots you see in this match that anyone that would watch a lot of Delirious around this point would be like staples. The spots where he sticks his fingers in his mouth and licks them and then rubs them on his opponent's face. The kind of gibberish where every few words you can make out some English and it gets the crowd laughing. Running around the ring and in and out of it randomly. Like you mentioned, the complaining about being like his hair being pulled or eye pokes or things like that when his opponent has yet to come anywhere near him. Like this is like the first time I feel like on a main card he really got to kind of do the entire Delirious comedy act. So having not seen it in years, I don't think I've seen him do it in years. I enjoyed it, and it was again kind of interesting to see Colt Cabana actually play the straight man. I mean, he still did some of his own comedy spots and was usually jovial, but he did get frustrated a couple times during the match, and he did, again, like we said at the start, he basically had to be the straight guy for Delirious, so I thought there was a bit of a novelty there. But yeah, overall, it's not like an incredible match or anything. I mean, it didn't even go 8 minutes.
Cabana held back a bit, I'm assuming, because he had another match later.
Yes, and to make clear, Gabe on commentary, this is the second last show for Mark Nolte on commentary. It's him and Gabe. And Gabe says that Colt requested the singles match so he could climb the singles ranks. So basically, he's trying to justify Colt doing double duty tonight, even though his other match tonight is a very important match in kayfabe terms, is a tag title shot. But the idea is that Colt, after losing those 2 title shots to Aries, he's in such a hurry to try and climb the ranks. He doesn't even want to wait for a singles match, so he wanted double duty on this show.
Yeah, and I should mention that probably the real reason is they were sort of working with a lighter crew on this show. There was no Austin Aries, there was no Bryan Danielson, there was no Embassy.
No Alex Shelley.
There was no Vordell Walker, who clearly was a big part of recent shows. That's a significant chunk of people that are not there. So you had a couple guys doing double duty here. No Steve Corino. So you had somebody doing double duty for that too, but we'll get to that later.
Yeah. And speaking actually in a weird way of Steve Corino, our next match would be the Ring Crew Express of Dunn and Marcos defeating Alex Law and Ricky Landell in 546 when
good transition.
Yeah, when Marcos pinned Law after hitting a senton off the shoulders of Dunn as Dunn was sitting on the top rope. So, of course, Alex Law and Ricky Landell were Steve Corino's students, and in a strange case, which we'll get to later, they were on the show. Steve Corino wasn't, despite being advertised for the main event. I thought this was the second of probably, I would say, the first 4 matches all have some aspect of guys doing things they don't usually do. And in this sense, it was like the Ring Crew Express in a match where they are actually like the veterans and the harder booked team.
Right, a jobber match where Ring Crew Express are not the jobbers.
Exactly. So just like Colt being the straight man, you now have the Ring Crew Express being like the team that's going to win a jobber match. Although that said, the Ring Crew Express, I would say, gave them like half the offense. They were pretty generous to these guys, even though, if I was the Ring Crew Express, I might have been more selfish and been like, look, you're students. We never get to dominate anybody. Please, we're just going to beat you up. But I would say they went about 50-50 on this. I thought this match was average. It was fine. It was short and it was decent action, but you could tell, especially with the Corino students, that they looked like students. They were a little hesitant, a little green. Their execution wasn't always perfectly clean. They weren't really doing, showing off any personality, which granted is kind of hard when you only have 6 minutes in a tag match. But, they looked like students. They had the basic mechanics down, but they weren't perfect at it, and they're not fully formed yet. And even with that, I think Ricky Landell probably showed a little more than Dunn and Marcos, but
a little more than Law, you mean, right?
Yeah, I'm a little more than Law, and they did have one cool double team, I thought, Law and Landell, where they each did an arm wringer on one person's arm, so each having one arm and arm wringer, and then they kind of crossed them in front of their opponents and then kind of dragged them down. Like, it's kind of hard to describe, but it was a cool little move. And only other couple things I want to say before I throw it to you, Matt. First off, Dunn and Marcos do a double bulldog where they each start a bulldog in opposite corners and run towards each other. And as they jump in the air to do the bulldogs, they high five each other in midair. One, that is awesome, and two, like, if anyone in AEW listens to this, the Best Friends, you should slip Dunn and Marcos like a couple $100 and buy the rights to that move. I mean, you could just steal it, but because I think that would be a perfect move for the Best Friends when Trent heals from his injury. Like, it fits with their character. It's just a cool move. Like,
just tweet it at them because your Twitter's more popular than the show. So just tweet it at them. It'll totally happen.
You know what, Matt? That's just a showing that there's no accounting for taste. But finally, Matt, one interesting, funny, goofy moment on commentary. So Gabe at one point, he's always trying to sell stakes for matches, which I always love. And he says at one point, Dunn and Marcos have, their recent wins, they've risen to the heads of the ring crew. And he says if they lose here, they might be demoted in the ring crew. And I just thought for a second, how does that even make logic? Like, so who gets to set up the ring? Like, who gets to lead that process is determined by who wins wrestling matches. Like he was trying to sell, like, they now run the ring crew because they've won a couple matches recently. And I just thought I need someone to. I would have loved to have heard Gabe try to like explain how that makes sense.
Well, my interpretation is they run the ring crew because the Carnage crew are not there anymore. But I guess in kayfabe terms, Carnage crew had nothing to do with the ring crew, right? So I don't know.
Yeah, it was Outcast Killers were the other regular workers we would see that would be portrayed, and of course, then I guess the story there was Prince Nana took them out of the ring crew, so that was why they joined the embassy.
Right. So I guess everybody's gone, so probably ring crew, especially the entire ring crew at this point. But I wrote a lot of the same stuff you did. I think I liked the match a little bit worse than you because. Yes, the Corino students really did look like students, and I don't know, that took a lot away from it for me. They just didn't seem ready for this. I don't want to be mean, like it's, they're learning. But, Landell's kicks were pretty weak. His timing was okay, I suppose, but the forearms were weak. I agree with you that one double team move that they did where they crisscrossed the arms and dropped down on Marcos was cool, but, it just wasn't much. Yeah, I mean that's pretty much it. It was a squash match that wasn't totally a squash because they let the losing team get half the offense and the offense wasn't good. So, what are you going to do? It happens.
And the thing that continues to happen when I look at live reports for like every show is like, it seems like really regularly, there's always a fan that's like, wow, I'm shocked at how over the Ring Crew Express is. They were always a team, it felt like, that were more over than they're pushed. Not that I'm saying they should have been pushed hard, but they always get more of a reaction, I think, like I would say 8 out of 10 shows than you'd think they would get.
They should have been pushed harder, I think.
Yeah. They are going to get that Carnage Crew feud coming up, which is like a honest to goodness feud for them. But yeah, I mean, that might actually be like their most prominent role ever.
Yeah, but wait until you see those matches.
Yeah. Oh boy. We quickly see highlights of Austin Aries defending the Ring of Honor title against Vordell Walker in FIP. Gabe voiceover tells us that Aries is currently defending the Ring of Honor title in Europe, as his goal is to be an old school type champion who will take the title to different regions and territories. So he was wrestling in Europe at this point, I think like Austria or something, and I was looking over the results. He wrestles in a bunch of places. Like I think a month or two later, he's wrestling in Super Crazy and I think like Ricky Marvin or something in a 3-way in Mexico, defending the title there. So he definitely was, Joe did it a little bit, but Aries definitely took it to another level of, taking the Ring of Honor title and having a kind of a quote unquote official defenses of it in other indies.
Yeah, that's the mark. That's the mark that this title reign left on the title. It wasn't one of the longest title reigns in ROH history, but he left his stamp on it, which we can appreciate.
Yeah, absolutely. And coming up next, our third match of the show, Spanky defeated Jack Evans via pinfall in 7 minutes 27 seconds after he hit a top rope sliced bread number 2. Matt, before I throw it to you, I'll give you a report from Sean Radican from the Pro Wrestling Torch. I'll just give you this quote. He wrote, and, everyone's having the right to their own opinion, but we'll see how it compares or contrasts to ours. He wrote, quote, "This match was one of the most spectacular." He said, "This match was the best 8-minute match I've ever seen." Matt, was this the best 8-minute match you've ever seen, excepting that technically, apparently, it was 7 minutes, 27 seconds?
Nope, it wasn't. Do you want to give more quotes, or should I continue?
Okay, I'll do one more, which I thought was a little funny. He wrote in his live report, one of the standout moments of Saturday's Woodbridge event was a spot between Jack Evans and Spanky. Evans threw Spanky outside, then went to the opposite side of the ring and did 2 running handsprings like a gymnast doing a floor routine, followed by a flip backward over the rope onto Spanky. Torch contributor Sean Radican reports, "It was one of the most spectacular things I've ever seen in a wrestling ring." So when I read this before I rewatched the show, I thought, what's he talking about? It's going to be something cool. And then I realized after I watched the match, it was just a space flying tiger drop, which granted is a really cool move.
Yeah, with a few extra flips at the end. But yes, you're right. It was pretty much just that.
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was going to be something like he was describing that I couldn't quite imagine. That was something I'd never seen before. It was basically something that Jack Evans, I think, has done before this even, which is, his variation on that, which again, really cool move. And I imagine if you've never seen that move before would be mind blowing, but not to be some pushing up my glasses on my nose nerd like, well, clearly this person hasn't watched The Great Sasuke in 1995, but I mean,
stop doing an impression of me.
I was a little disappointed just because I had reading this, doing the research, I was getting my hopes up oh man, I'm going to see the coolest thing ever. I can't even imagine it. And then I was oh wait, no, I definitely have seen this before, but still, what do you think about the match itself, though?
I mean, I can't say I didn't. I mean, I liked it. It was fun. There wasn't much of a storyline to it, and it was short, and it was not the smoothest, but, they did fun stuff. Jack Evans is always entertaining. This wasn't his best performance in recent weeks, but it was still fun, and, Spanky's been pretty solid lately. Spanky is still, Evans is still doing a lot of personality work, character work, which always helps. He immediately comes out and yells that he's the greatest athlete to ever come out of Washington, and then he breakdances and looks at Spanky and goes, "Boom! You can't do that." That's Spanky. So Spanky does a little jig in response, which the crowd does enjoy, and they actually decided that it was Jack who got served. In this case, the little jig served him, and then Jack immediately says, "Come on now, kid. I don't play." But then they do in fact dance and lock legs. But, of course, Evans betrays Spanky and gets him in a small package. And Gabe says, Jack Evans, for the first time, outsmarting somebody. So, I don't know who to feel worse for there, Jack or Spanky.
I wrote that in my notes and I just wrote, ouch.
Yeah. But like they do like cool stuff. Like Spanky monkey flipped Evans over the top rope to the outside. And Spanky celebrated by dancing and doing a somersault in the ring. Then they get intense, and actually, even at a certain point, Spanky whips Jack into the barricade, and Jack does like a big like flip bump where he goes over the rails, and he cuts up his back real bad. So we're back to the dangerously sharp guardrails. I guess it had been a while since we'd seen that.
Yeah.
But there we go. So Spanky's working over the back, and Evans uses like flexibility to get to the ropes, and Nolte says, "Who else makes it to the ropes from that position?" And I was saying, having watched a lot of ROH and having seen very few tap outs to the Boston Crab, I'd say almost everyone makes it to the ropes from that position, because it was just the Boston Crab. But Spanky does like a walk up the ropes into a slice spread number 2, but Evans actually does a cartwheel to escape the hold, and I thought that was really cool. He does that space flying tiger drop thingy that you mentioned. Which, I mean, it's a really cool spot. Like always, when it's not like, oh my God, my life has changed, but it's a really cool spot. As
a kid, the first time I saw the space flying tiger drop by anybody, I forget who it was even. I remember like losing my shit. That was like one of those, oh my God, that's such a crazy thing moves.
I feel like for me it was Hakushi, who I first saw.
Honestly, that's probably who it is for me too. Yeah.
Yeah. At a certain point, Jack Evans does a bunch of standing flips, and Gabe calls it a Phoenix corkscrew before admitting that he doesn't actually know how to describe it. So, hey, I'll give him some credit for coming up with that.
Yeah.
It's the Phoenix corkscrew. But Spanky knocks Jack off when he tries the 630, and then he does a slice spread off the ropes and gets the 3 count. I think you could tell from my description, it was fun. Like they did fun stuff. They're just like, it didn't really hold together in any sort of way that made it bigger than the sum of its parts. But I definitely enjoyed it.
Yeah, part of me wonders why this match was so short, and maybe like we'll get in again. We keep alluding to this. We'll get to it later. Why Steve Corino no-showed the main event, but part of me just to tell you what happens. Spanky ends up replacing him in the main event. Part of me wonders, did Gabe by this point in the show know that Corino was out, because that might explain why Spanky only worked 7 minutes here with Jack Evans, or maybe that was just they thought that was the best amount of time for a Jack Evans singles match. I
think it's because they knew they needed time on the DVD to have the history of Special K video.
By the way, Matt, that is going to be the image of the show, that Special K 2003 to 2005. I love that. Anyway, we'll get to that later too. But yeah, I thought this was a good match. I agree pretty much completely with you about how, it wasn't necessarily the cleanest offense. I thought it was the third straight match to start the show where guys doing something a little different. Like, you usually don't expect Jack Evans to get like 50% of the offense against a fairly major name on the indies. Although we did see recently with the Alex Shelley match too, where Shelley, I don't know if he gave him 50%, but he didn't squash him the way you would say like a Samoa Joe or a Danielson would do. And that's nothing against how Joe or Danielson would treat him, because I think we agree those were spectacularly fun matches. But definitely we're in a couple recent Jack Evans matches, we've seen guys actually try and give him more offense and let him be a little more credible and kind of work a bit closer to even. Jack Evans, his moves were cool as usual. I thought his bumps were really good, except my one problem with Jack Evans' bumps, and I've noticed this occasionally on shows, but especially on this show, is sometimes he takes such big bumps for moves that you can almost see him like preloading the bump before the move hits. And sometimes like he'll take a bump so big that's almost like the move has no weight. Like a guy will do like a little clothesline. He'll do like the craziest corkscrew flip land. And it's hard to kind of keep your suspension of disbelief that like he was actually doing that as a bump and not just doing that a jump and a flip, because sometimes he will do like just the craziest, flip bumps for relatively moderate moves. And there was a bit of that I found in this match where there was a couple of moves where they didn't even look like Spanky was hitting that much, and Jack Evans was flying around and kind of almost in a weird way calling attention to that.
I love that. I love that expression, preloading the bumps.
Yeah, like sometimes you can almost tell like he's just kind of like kind of tensing up or crouching down or starting to, whatever, just going to start to jump into a move before the guy even hits so he can just do the flip. And obviously the flips are cool. I love the flips, but occasionally you can overdo it a little bit. But yeah, if you just want another all action kind of no story match, and one of the things we always talk about, like with the, we did we're famous for, unfortunately, the counting every show in a row that had man-on-woman violence, and we talked about all the things we should have and shouldn't have kept track of. Like, we should have kept track of, if we had known ahead of time, the number of shows where Gabe called Nigel McGuinness's arm submission that arm submission without giving it a name. I think another thing we should have kept track of is the number of people who have gotten cut by the sharp sheet metal ROH guardrails, because like you said, Matt, Jack gets like a very long cut on his back, which was probably no fun at all. It looked like a real thin, long cut. And having done a little bit of research for like the next couple shows, I think it's for like a show or two down the line, like we will have another story of maybe a fan cutting themselves on one of these guardrails coming up soon. So, I mean, it's got to be like,
it's a lot. But
it'll probably be double digits by the time they fucking get to better guardrail signs.
But the last time I remember it was the year earlier, where Joe did it at the second anniversary show, and his hand was just like terrifying.
Yeah, and he had to get the tape put on it and everything. And Joe told that story.
And you see him looking at his hand and being like, "Oh."
Yeah, so it's crazy. Like, if it happens to one person, maybe you say it's a fluke. If it happens to two or three, like at that point, I realized Ring of Honor was not a big budget promotion, but just not even buy a new guardrail sign. Just someone get like a sander or something, do something,
Well, I do have to, in their defense, I do think these are different than the original ones and less sharp. I think they've already changed them by now.
Less sharp.
Yes. Well, I'm just saying, like, that's why when they first got them, like, you heard it a lot. Yeah. You saw it a lot, and now it kind of happens sometimes, but it shouldn't. I mean, it's clearly still too dangerous.
After the match, Gary Michael Capetta makes his way to the ring and he grabs a mic. He congratulates Spanky on the win. He says he has some news for Spanky. Gary goes on to say that Ring of Honor will be returning to Boston, and that actually draws a few boos from the crowd. So these Connecticut fans, not a fan of Boston, or maybe they just felt like if they go to Boston, they won't come back to Connecticut. He goes, Spanky, you're now in the top tier of contenders for the Ring of Honor World title. He says Aries is currently scheduled to defend the title on that next show in the Boston area, and Spanky is looking good to challenge on that night, except there's one thing that needs to happen. Gary says James Gibson is another top contender and is wrestling later tonight, and in order to get that title shot, Gibson will have to lose later tonight. Spanky kind of just seems physically, you see his physical mannerisms, he's kind of torn on how he should feel about this. But Matt, I thought the weird thing about this, I realize it's trying to build that kind of frenemy tension with Spanky and Gibson, and also add some stakes for the Gibson-Rocky Romero match later tonight. But I think how weird this segment is in kayfabe terms, in that Gary Michael Capetta randomly comes out to the ring after match, is like, I got some big news for you, Spanky. You could have a title shot if another guy loses tonight. Like I had to interrupt everything to tell you this. Like, that's such a weird announcement.
Now, I have to say, I'm just thinking about this from like a logic standpoint. So Spanky returns. He beats Alex Shelley, right?
Yeah.
Then he beats CM Punk, right?
Yeah.
Then he loses to James Gibson. Then he beats Jimmy Jacobs. Then there was a trios tournament. Then he beats Jack Evans. So Gibson hadn't lost yet, but he did have a bunch fewer matches, and he didn't beat Alex Shelley and CM Punk. I don't know. I don't know really if it makes sense that Gibson would be ahead of Spanky here. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know either. I guess you could say, if he beats Romero, that's the more impressive win on this night, in the sense, because Romero was recently a tag champ. At this point, Jack Evans never held the title. But yeah, like you said, though, I mean, beating CM Punk and Alex Shelley, that's pretty big wins to start off your run here.
Yeah, I mean, whatever. You should. Yeah, it's overthinking it, but exactly. But that's what we do, right?
But again, we wouldn't be overthinking it if they didn't call attention to it by having Gary Michael Capetta like randomly come out and be like, I got big news. Yeah. He'll get a title shot if somebody loses tonight, which is a weird thing to hype. But anyway, at this point, Roderick Strong walks to the ring. The crowd chants, "You tapped out," for a recent WWE extra work he did, because, yeah, like we said with the rave thing, a lot of the guys were tapping out from Ring of Honor and WWE at this point. Strong grabs the mic to say that he got paid to tap out. Strong then tells Spanky that the only way he'll get to Austin Aries is through Generation Next. Spanky snatches the mic back and he starts screaming. He calls Strong a disrespectful little prick, but Jack Evans attacks Spanky from behind. Strong and Evans beat him down. Evans tells Spanky that he got knocked the fuck out. So, yeah, we're going to see a lot of this now, and this time Mark Nolte keeps talking about during the show the idea of wrestlers like Austin Aries having, like, set-up men, guys.
Policemen.
Oh, yeah, policemen is the term he kept saying over and over again.
Why not just use the word enforcer? That makes more sense.
Exactly. There might have been even a famous wrestler that had that nickname that played that role as much as anybody.
Right.
But, yeah, the idea that, in a stable, there's like a second guy that, you always have to beat him if you want to get to the top guy. And obviously that's what they're setting up Strong to be in this situation, to be the kind of, you want to get to Aries, you're going to have to beat Strong.
I guess Strong can't be the enforcer because Austin Aries is AA, or as he called him, A double.
We'll get to another, great Mark Nolte pronunciation or way of saying things in a little bit too, actually. Next matchup was the winner. This is a stipulation match. Winner gets the Special K name tag team match. Special K of Azrael and Dixie defeated Special K of Deranged and Izzy, who were escorted to the ring by Cheech, Cloudy, and Lacey in 12 minutes, 40 seconds, when Azrael pinned Deranged after he hit an electric chair driver off the second rope. And this is I said there was 4 matches at the start that all kind of went against my expectations in some way. This was the last of those, and I would say this one does because it's got way less flying than you think. It's like, Special K was really known and mostly positioned as just the crazy spot monkeys who are always in multi-man matches, or they were getting like the shit beat out of them in tag matches where they were just getting nearly squashed or outright squashed. And this match, they get a decent amount of time and they kind of work a somewhat more reserved, like straight up wrestling match. Like they follow the tag rules closely to the point where, like, late in the match, where you think it's going to do the usual thing that, like, almost all tags of this era do, which they break down and everyone starts running in and out of the ring. Deranged at one point, like, runs in when he's not the legal man, like, helps out his partner, and then, like, drags, his partner back to his corner so he can get tagged in just so he can be the legal man for the finish. Like, it's an attention of detail you probably wouldn't expect from a Special K match at this point, but it has it. They even start the match with, like, some mat work and some submission attempts. Dixie does like a neat little leg trip and does like a legit good amateur like wrestling style back ride that even impresses Mark Nolte on commentary. We see stuff like a bow and arrow, a surfboard, and like, are they executed as well as, say, Bryan Danielson would do them? Probably not, but it was still neat, again, for someone that's been watching every show to see these guys kind of do things you don't see from them, at least in Ring of Honor. And
that neckbreaker code red combo was at least as well as Bryan Danielson would do it.
Oh yeah, and that is definitely the highlight of this match. I would say is that neck breaker. They do a combination, Deranged and Izzy, code red, like neck breaker on the same guy at the same time, which was really cool. They also do like a cool double brainbuster where they both hold the guy up in the air, but one like sits out and the other guy does like the traditional drop. I don't know if it quite makes sense of how that makes the move hurt more, but it was a neat little difference. But overall, yeah, like this is not an incredible match, but I would call it like a decent like 3.25 star, like fun little traditional tag match. They do have a bit of bigger action at the end, especially again, you get that big finish with the electric chair driver off the second turnbuckle. And yeah, this is kind of a Special K match, I think, for people that don't like Special K in the sense that, it's kind of hot tag, heels cheat behind the ref's back, respect the legal man, build up with a little bit of mat work to start. It's a surprisingly traditional little tag match, which in a weird way, part of me was a little disappointed because you would think the Battle of Special K would be like their craziest match ever, but it was actually kind of their most sensible match ever in Ring of Honor.
And they do have another match coming up in a few shows where they go more in the direction you'd expect. But this is definitely the let's prove we're real wrestlers match. Like, everything that you said was clearly a very conscious decision on their part. Like, let's subvert everybody's expectations. Let's do all this traditional wrestling stuff. Let's, make blind tags behind the ref's back and, have our seconds, like choke somebody over the ropes and stuff, and just pepper in a few of our big spots. And I feel like you said, like, not everything was so smooth. But they did a lot of quick tags. They did a lot of grounded wrestling, character work. I really like Derange's spot early where he runs the ropes like he's going to do a big, like, intense move, and then he just locks on a chin lock on Dixie, and the crowd goes along with it. They chant "Holy shit" for that. That's that's fun. And I think I'd agree with your basic star rating, 3.25 stars, but like, that's good. Like, that's a darn good match.
Yeah.
And they do a good job. They do their big spots at the end, but Izzy springboards in, but Azrael catches him for the electric chair. They do the neckbreaker code red thing. Izzy hits the Blue Thunder driver on Dixie, then does a dive to the outside onto Dixie. Derange hits a double stomp onto Azrael's chest, and then he goes for the top rope Rana, but Azrael catches him and hits that top rope electric chair. I thought the finish was great. Like, a really, really good and well done finish. Not every spot in the match was perfectly done, but that was. And
the crowd loved that finish. They chant like "Holy shit!" And then there was, I thought, a surprisingly big round of applause after the finish too. Like, when they won.
Yeah.
I was surprised at like how into the Special K winning as they were.
Yeah, I mean, the spots that they don't do all the time were the ones that maybe didn't look as good. But, like, their big spots they do a lot. They hit them all pretty perfectly. And usually they don't, honestly. So I think this was a pretty admirable effort, all in all.
Yeah, again, because it was them outside of their comfort zone. Like, how many times have these guys gotten like nearly 13 minutes to wrestle a match where they're not just expected to either do a spot every 10 seconds or like get squashed by someone to make them look good? This was a pretty rare, might be one of the only examples of this up to this point in Ring of Honor for these guys. So to see them excel this well at it is really, really cool. After the match, the crowd starts chanting "Take it off" at Izzy in the ring to take off his shirt, his Special K shirts, and they realize, again, this shows you, I guess, how smart this crowd and how they knew the stip going in. So they knew immediately, like, you can't wear that shirt anymore. You don't have the rights to that name anymore. And then you see Cheech on the outside. He's like, okay, I'll take off my shirt. And you can see fans like, no, we're not talking to you. But Cheech being the goofball, he's like, takes off his shirt. And then Izzy takes off his and kind of like mocks the crowd. So they lose the rights to wear those very special shirts, Matt.
Those very special K shirts.
Exactly. And that brings us to the next match, to the biggest match up to this point on the show. Homicide scored to the ring by Julius Smokes, although that will quickly change. Defeated Roderick Strong, scored to the ring by Jack Evans, although that will quickly change via pinfall, 18 minutes, 27 seconds after he hits a second big lariat in a row. Before the match, Strong gets on the mic and he says something to Homicide I can't quite understand. The audio quality in this building was not the greatest. Crowd chants, "Shut the fuck up." Strong goes on to say that tonight is about him versus Homicide, not Generation X versus the Rottweilers. Strong wants to send both Jack Evans and Julius Smokes to the back. Evans goes to the back, and actually so does Smokes then. So this is kind of continuing something we've seen Gabe book, especially with Generation Next sometimes, which is the idea of in the big matches, they don't want help. It's kind of like they want to prove, that they're really on that level. We saw kind of Aries do that last year, I think. And then at this point, Homicide then briefly jumps into the crowd to confront a fan, but he immediately leaves chuckling. But although you do see him later in the match kind of keep looking and acknowledging the fan, Gabe says there's no excuse for Homicide to do what he just did. Gabe for the 1100th time says, Homicide's almost provoking a riot again.
But the riot thing plays a little worse in 2021 than it did even then.
Exactly. Later during the match, Homicide gets into it with the fan, but they never cut to a camera showing it. So, Matt, before I get your opinions on the match, I'm just going to say I kept wondering, well, what the hell was Homicide kept acknowledging this fan? And I was kind of disappointed because I thought it would be like some fan said something horrible to him. It was surprisingly innocuous. This is from a PW Insider Live report from James Brown. I wish it was that James Brown, but
it was.
Godfather of Soul, huge fan of mid-aughts indie wrestling. But James Brown wrote, Homicide defeated Roderick Strong with a short-range lariat. This was a very good match. Early on, my friend decided to be a ball-buster towards Homicide, stating, April 3rd is not only WrestleMania, but opening day where Boston will beat the Yankees in New York City. Homicide decided to jump the rail and start a ruckus, which was enjoyable. So this entire thing that Homicide keeps going back to this fan was because a fan shouted before the match that the Red Sox were going to beat the Yankees. And,
Julius Smokes had a Patriots jersey on the week before, just saying.
Exactly.
But James Brown didn't die until 2006, so I think that he was filling a live report for the show. Remember, wasn't he at Super Brawl once? So I think he's a wrestling fan. He was at the show, submitted a live report to PW Insider. That's what happened.
I would have loved that at the end. He was just like, "Good God" or "Have mercy" was like the last thing he said in the report, but no.
Papa's got a brand new DVD. A brand new bag of DVDs. Oh man, I ruined it.
A brown bag sale of DVDs. So Matt,
Papa's got a brand new bag of DVDs. It was a buy 3 get 1 free sale.
Matt, this is the kind of humor that makes us the number 14 podcast in all of Denmark.
Exactly. Because like, especially for the non-English speakers there, they love it.
Exactly. The people transcribing it for our thousands of fans that are going to get a real chuckle. But, Matt, so 2005 was obviously, this was a year we'll get to quotes in later episodes where Gabe really had it in his mind to start pushing Roderick Strong a bit more. And clearly you would say this is one of like the early signs, getting 18 minutes against Homicide. So big opportunity. How do you think he did, and how was the match?
I would say, if you see this match on paper, you'd probably expect it to be better than it was. Not that it was bad. I mean, it was good. I feel like it probably would have been better actually if Jack Evans and Julius Smokes were there doing some character work on the outside. But they tried to go the serious route. They do the they have a pretty clean start. And then Homicide does the first heel move where he bites Strong's hand. Remember, this is technically 2 heels against each other. So that always sort of gets the crowd in a little bit of a weird place. Yeah. But, they spent a long time reversing arm bars. Nolte gets to, be in his glory, talking about policemen. At least in this, it makes more sense for Roderick Strong than it does with Jimmy Rave, which was the other time he mentioned it before this. So I'll give him that. There's stuff where you really highlight ROH's really random rules because Homicide hits Roderick with a chair on the outside. And it's like, remember that was happening a lot in 2004 and they were like, we're going to get strict with the rules now. And now, but if Homicide decides to do it in the middle of a match, like they're obviously not going to stop the match, right? So, yeah. So what are you going to do, I guess? But Strong does at least one impressive power move where he gets Homicide up in a power slam position, runs his back against the post, and then just chucks him back first against the guardrail. And, that allows Homicide to, to take over, on Homicide's back. Gabe posits that there's a curse not allowing Generation Next to defeat the Rottweilers. And that curse would allow Homicide to win against Aries as well. Because remember, Generation Next lost to the Rottweilers at the Trios tournament the week before.
Yeah.
Homicide is working on Roderick's neck, and Nolte calls a move that he does a leg Nelson stretch, which he has to have made that up, right? Like that can't be an actual. Somebody tell me, is there a leg Nelson stretch? I don't know. As far as just the moves and stuff they do, they're fine. Just never really feels like it gets to this level of intensity that you'd want. At one point, Strong avoids the lariat and catches him with a half Nelson backbreaker, and that's the first big backbreaker of the match. Gets 2 count on that. Homicide hits a Rana from the top rope, a pile driver. They do a few reversals. Roderick gets another backbreaker and locks on the Boston Crab pre-Stronghold. And I was going to ask you, is this the first time he did that hold? I don't remember if we've seen him do that in ROH before.
I'm not sure, Crab. But this is the first time it really stood out to me. Like, oh yeah, Strong did used to do the backbreaker a lot. So if this wasn't the first time, it has to be an early time because I had that same impression watching this. Was like it stood out to me, which. I mean, I guarantee you in a year or two, it's not going to stand out to me when Roderick Strong does a Boston Crab.
Yeah, well, it became his finisher, at least one of them. At least, by not too much later in the year than this. So, that helps. But, At a certain point, Homicide hits the top rope H crusher, hits a lariat, and Strong kicks out, and that finish actually got me. I mean, that near fall. I actually thought Strong was not going to kick out. But then Homicide follows it up immediately with another lariat, and Strong lands on his neck, and Homicide gets the 3. I really did feel that, whatever you say about this match, it does feel like it's like almost the quintessential back to basics match. They just had a match, kind of. There wasn't anything fancy about it. And, there was a story, which was Strong. He was weakening Homicide for the title match that was coming up, which is a reasonable story to tell, and it had the right finish. I don't know. It wasn't bad at all. It was good, but, I guess I was hoping for a little better. I don't know.
I agree completely. I would say this was as a match would be again, as good as the special. See, this is a match where expectations kind of teaches you about expectations, because I would give this match probably the same star rating if I had to as the Special K tag we just watched, and we were really praising the Special K match for being a 3.25 star match, and yet I'm going to say this is a disappointment. But that's because the difference is when you see Homicide and Roderick Strong get 18 minutes, your expectations are more than a 3.25 star match. But where the Special K thing, for better or worse, you maybe are not just oh, I'm sure they're going to just hit a giant home run here. And yeah, this was a decent match, but the way I would say it, I think you kind of said it in a different way. This match is never more than the sum of its parts. I felt like Homicide was doing all the stuff he would normally do, and Roderick Strong was doing all the stuff that he normally did. But whenever either guy was on offense, it felt like anyone in the world could have been the person taking their offense. They weren't really interacting in a weird way, or you were saying, there's not really an emotional connection. It was almost like eating a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, but instead of eating it all together, you're eating a bite of bread and then a spoonful of peanut butter and then a spoonful of jelly.
That's my favorite Trevor food analogy I've ever heard.
Exactly. It's technically it's the same food, but it's not coming together. It still feels different in not a pleasurable way.
I'm trying that. I'm trying that tomorrow.
You ever try that sometimes where you eat food and you realize you forgot to put something on the food, so you just quickly grab a spoonful of hot sauce and somehow you think the hot sauce is going to catch up to the food that you've half eaten and oh, this will taste the same, but really it's not a good experience.
I don't think I've done. You mean eat take a spoonful of hot sauce separately from the food, don't put it on the food but just eat the hot sauce to see. So you're you're seasoning the food after the fact. Is that what you're trying to say? No, I don't think I've done that. Actually,
I'm not that smart, Matt. But actually, that was just a joke, Matt. Don't take that seriously. I've never done that.
Maybe I'm the weird one here.
I agree, though, that the most impressive spot in the match was Roderick Strong chucking Homicide into the barricade. Also, just because I don't think you normally – that's the one thing that felt like their personas were kind of interacting. You don't usually see Homicide get tossed around like that in Ring of Honor. And, to see Strong do that to him, it was kind of oh, that's an interesting interaction that kind of plays into both of their personas and what they can kind of do or don't usually have done to them. But everything else was just oh, it's Strong doing his offense, Homicide doing his. It's all mechanically perfectly well executed. I did like that, the end where Homicide, like you said, where Homicide hits him with the first lariat and he gives him that lariat to kick out. That's his big, I'm going to let him survive one. And then he just murders him with the second, and Strong kind of goes dead weight when he rolls him over. I thought that was a cool finish. But yeah, it just, for 18 minutes, you for guys of this talent, you want more. And clearly, when you look at it, it was the last match before intermission. It got a ton of time. Clearly, this was meant to be one of those kind of matches that bumped up Strong stock. And this, quite frankly, I don't think did do that. So the Nolte pronunciation thing I thought was funny. This is coming from the guy that once called CM Punk CM. Nolte during a commentary calls Homicide. He goes, that's Homicide, the notorious 187. Is Mark Nolte the only guy that says 187 and not 187? That rap lyric, Gabe, 187 on an undercover cop. You know how it is. But
that hipping hopping lyric.
Gabe also predicted, on commentary, he says Roderick Strong's going to be the breakout star of 2005, which I don't know if it's quite he'll be that level, but it definitely will be a more true Gabe prediction than when he said on a recent show that Vordell Walker is the best prospect in all of wrestling.
I think by the end of the year, I think you can make a pretty decent case that he was the breakout star of 2005, at least the second half of the year, since Gibson probably was for the first half.
Yeah, and I guess going to that point, he'll have matches against James Gibson and against, Bryan Danielson that will accomplish, I think, what this match was trying to accomplish for him, but just for whatever reason didn't get there.
A couple really good ones against CM Punk too.
Yeah, he will have a good year this year. It's just this match for whatever reason, just for some reason, not a bad match, just for whatever reason does not click. And I think it's telling with Homicide, where whenever he has a match where it's like just decent like this, it seems really weird. Because I remember one time we watched him wrestle Christopher Daniels, and we were like, oh, this is only like decent. And it was like a shock to us. And I think that's actually a sign that you're a pretty damn good wrestler when it's like almost like just a complete left field surprise when a match you have against another good wrestler is like not at least around 3 3/4, 4 stars,
right.
Great, pretty much. And this was a rare one where he had a good opponent and they didn't get there for some reason. But we go backstage as it's intermission. Gary Michael Capetta tells us that we'll find out if Spanky will be the number one contender later tonight, depending on if James Gibson wins his match, which I guess if Gary wanted to frame it another way, we could also find out if James Gibson becomes number one contender tonight. Gary is then joined by Dixie and Azrael. Dixie says it's a great feeling to win, but Special K doesn't represent who they are now. He says they're ashamed of all the partying they did, and as far as they're concerned, the Special K name is dead. And Gary at the point is like, you've heard it, the Special K name does not exist anymore. And that's the end of the segment. So this is something that I don't know if this is the only time this has happened in Ring of Honor, but it kind of reminds me of say the Homicide Punk Samoa Joe match we saw last year, where it's like the winner gets to call themselves the icon of Ring of Honor, and it was almost immediately never mentioned. This is a match for the winner gets to be Special K, and the winners are immediately like, we don't want to be Special K. The name is dead, and we'll get to a segment later which makes it even kind of more ridiculous. But Matt, the only thing I'll say about this, why I feel bad for Azrael and Dixie at this point, is we've talked about this in the past too, which is the idea of you can't take away a character from a wrestler, even if the character is getting stale, and not give them a new character. And I feel with Azrael and Dixie, between getting rid of the theme music they had, which, by the way, even on this show, they still did not have entrance music, and they don't really have characters at this point, but then they also don't have the fun Special K character. And I guess since this is the last show with Special K, I'll say, I want to know your opinion. I think Special K at this point, it wasn't a bad move to get rid of it. I do think it kind of ran its course. But at the same time, it was a fun gimmick, and you can't just take away a gimmick. Now these guys just feel like kind of sticks in the mud that are just stuck in the undercard. They don't really have a hook to them now. Yeah, well, because you can tell he wants to push Azrael. You can tell Gabe wants to push Azrael.
Yeah, I mean, Lacey's Angels I thought was a fine thing to do for the heels. I mean, I thought that was equivalent to what Special K had been, at least recently. Never got to the level that Special K was earlier, but, it was fine. But yeah, they really had a lack of creativity when it came to Dixie and Azrael. I guess the idea was they wanted to just do a Jay Lethal thing. Because really, you have to admit, they didn't really give Jay Lethal a character. He was Samoa Joe's protege, but it's not like he had some big personality. And, no. Really never did in his in his initial run in ROH. Really, he really found a personality in TNA, right?
Yeah, with the Black Machismo, and then even in the post Gabe Ring of Honor where Jay Lethal started to be a main eventer. I remember people being a revelation, oh wait, Jay Lethal can just cut a really good promo as Jay Lethal, because we've talked about, recent shows, we were kind of joking at how hammy Jay Lethal's delivery can be at some points.
I'm sure he would not be offended if we said he was bad at promos at this point in his career. I don't think he would mind that at all, because clearly he's good at them now, but he wasn't good always.
And I don't think it's crazy to say also that there's been a bunch of really good in-ring wrestlers where they do end up getting the total package and I'm not talking Lex Luger here, but I'm just saying, like, in terms of charisma, like, that's the last thing they get, I feel like. Like Rocky Romero, those first shows in Ring of Honor, he did one of those promos with Reyes, and he looked nervous and kind of stiff and robotic, and now he's a very charismatic guy, you know.
The Briscoes.
On commentary. Yeah. Great example.
But yeah, I mean, they never really give Azrael or Dixie a chance to get that because even throughout this entire feud, Azrael and Dixie are just like, yeah, sticks in the mud, party poopers. They won't come out to music. They look sad all the time. It's like, what are we getting behind here? Yeah, they didn't really do right by them, honestly. But also, you know, like they have to hold up their end too, and we'll see how that goes. You know, as we continue to watch.
That'll be interesting to see. Four-corner survival match came up next. This was the first match back from intermission. Allison Danger defeated Cindy Rogers, Daisy Hayes, and Lacey in 8 minutes, 48 seconds when she pinned Rogers after hitting an STO. So yeah, we were starting to see more women's matches in Ring of Honor at this point. We're starting to see a lot of just these four-ways, but this is one of those matches, and I've said this for a couple of these women's matches, where they count as progress for Ring of Honor. I mean, four women getting nearly 9 minutes counts as progress at this point. Gabe's commentary, Nolte starts the commentary by saying, "I'm proud of you, Gabe, for referring to the women as athletes." And Gabe then replies to Mark with a surprisingly cutting remark where he's like, he says something like, "Your opinions mean nothing to me."
Not that any praise from you means anything to me. That's what he says.
Exactly. Like, I was like, whoa, because Gabe and Nolte were not ever playing like the bickering commentary partners or the face heel. Like, it was never like that. And,
did not seem like acting. Yeah.
Yeah. But Gabe then admits, "I've made sexist comments on previous shows." And then Gabe, less than a minute later, makes a comment on how great the camera shot is of Lacey's ass.
He also never apologizes for making those sexist comments. He just says that he made them.
Okay, yeah, you're right. Gabe also later talks about Allison Danger recently got bruised up on a show, and he says, you know, Allison Danger's too pretty to have a bruised up face. But in terms of the match, I mean, it was perfectly average. It was a four-way. Some of the offense looked a little rough, but, you know, overall, it went without any kind of, I would say without any major hitch, except there was one spot where Allison Danger goes to whip Daisy Hayes into the ropes. I think she was supposed to land on the second rope, and instead she just lands and like smashes her face into the first one. And you can hear the crowd like, oh. But other than that, not like a crazy botch anywhere. I felt like Lacey and Cindy Rogers got to show more here in this match than anyone else. I thought Rogers looked pretty good. Lacey looked pretty good.
Was this Rogers' first match in ROH? I don't remember.
Yes, it is. It absolutely is. Daisy Hayes, I thought she was the highlight in recent Ring of Honor women's matches that she's been in. She doesn't really get to do a ton here. She gets to do her big flying drop kick, so she's not the highlight here more just because she's not, I think, is heavily featured. Allison Danger probably looked like the weakest. She didn't get to do much, but she did get to win the match and do the finish. We saw, like, you know, some basic mat work, a rolling cradle, some decent offense. And I would say, if nothing else, the women's wrestling in Ring of Honor at this point had gotten to the point where I don't think you could say it hurt the show. Like, is it going to be like a highlight of the show? No, but like for people that were saying at this point, you can't have women's matches on Ring of Honor, like it'll totally bring down the show. Like, this match was perfectly fine. The crowd enjoyed it fine, although I will note a live report said that the crowd chanted camel toe at Lacey, which I did not pick up watching the match back, but yeah, that's shitty. But apart from that, you know, it felt like the crowd took it, like enjoyed it as a match, I would say.
Sometimes in crowds, you know, the people near you do a chant and it sounds like it's a big chant, but then you realize it wasn't. So hopefully it was just a couple of assholes and not like a large thing chanting that at Lacey, but who knows? It definitely was the least sexist commentary yet, but still very sexist. So I wrote at some point, like, come on, Prazak, like let's get through this awkward period, because it feels like we're not going to have to deal with that much more of this, which is a nice feeling to know that, like, the sexist commentary in ROH is probably going to come to an end pretty soon. In terms of our watching, it really makes me happy to see that, because it's exhausting, honestly. That this is the best that they got. At a certain point, like when Gabe said that he made sexist comments in the past, he actually says like, well, now that they've impressed him, he's going to be less sexist. And not like I'm going to be less sexist because it's wrong, but just like, well, you know what? They've shown themselves to be good enough that I can treat them with respect. Which is like, that's, I think, even more sexist, honestly. But you're right. I think Lacey looked the best, honestly, and she's the dominant personality in the match. Her personality is kind of like the thing that you pay most attention to. Danger, yeah, she really kind of didn't stay in it too much, despite winning the match. At one point, Hayes and Danger, like, they're fighting in the corner. It doesn't look great. But Hayes pushes Danger away and hits another top rope drop kick to her. And Nolte goes, and that's why Hayes is considered a better athlete than Danger. And I'm thinking, is that a nice thing to say? I don't know. Is that okay? Well, whatever. But I guess it is true, but still.
Well, it's also hard because, like, when Nolte says stuff like this, like, I don't ever feel like he has, like, the credibility. Like, I don't believe he's been watching a lot of Allison Danger and Daisy Hayes matches on the indies, like.
Exactly, yeah. He doesn't know what he's talking about.
Yes, exactly.
Like, when he did
and
that.
He's the least objectionable one in the commentator in these women's matches at this point.
Yeah. But, like, when he does that rant about Lacey back at Midnight Express reunion, and he's like, the only thing she knows about wrestling is that she can't do it. And, like, nobody's like, hey, she's been wrestling for a while now. Like, well, whatever.
Yeah.
But there is one other spot besides the one that you mentioned where there is some awkwardness. Like, it's where Lacey and Danger are arguing with each other, and like they're waiting for Rogers to come and like break it up and attack one of them, but Rogers takes too long. So you see like Lacey like turning around, like being like, "Hey, what's happening?" Like that spot's a little bit awkward. But other than that, it's pretty much what you said. There is some sort of fight in the outside between Hayes and Danger, and off camera something happens that pops the crowd bigger than any other spot in the match. but we don't see it, and I have no idea what it was. So that's always a great thing. But yeah, I'd say this was on the scale of ROH women's matches. It wasn't the best they've had so far, but it was almost the best they've had so far. It was just maybe like one or maybe like the second or third best women's match so far in ROH, which isn't saying much. But not too great, but not bad. Yeah, I would agree. It didn't take anything away from the show.
Yeah. I mean, and it's progress in the sense that they got more time than Delirious, than Jack Evans, than, the Ring Crew Express.
No, it's a good point. It's a good point.
Yeah. So next up was the Ring of Honor tag title match. BJ Whitmer and Dan Moff successfully defended their titles by defeating Colt Cabana and Nigel McGuinness in 13 minutes, 59 seconds when Whitmer pinned Cabana after he hit the wrist clutch exploder. This was Dan Moff's last match in Ring of Honor, at least for the Gabe Sapolsky era, and we can go into that after we talk about the match, I guess, because that's his own thing. But Matt, this was we've enjoyed Cabana and Nigel as a team in a match before. What'd you think about this? Big match on the second half of the card for the tag titles.
Yeah, I don't know what it was. I mean, maybe I do, but like, I wasn't crazy about this. I just didn't find it very entertaining, especially by Nigel and Colt standards. Two wrestlers that I, like a lot. I'm not really sure that I ever loved Moff and Whitmer together as a team. I definitely think that they've been worse since they've won the titles. Like, their few matches that they've had, I haven't been into them. I'm not really sure what they're going for. I'm not sure if they're supposed to be heels or what. Like, they jump Nigel and Colt before the bell, just like they did with Jacobs and Delirious at the anniversary show. I'm just not sure. They're much less animated than they were in the match with Cornette and Heenan, but they're also more serious. They're not stooging and stuff like that.
You know what I would say just quickly is I think it goes back to what we just said about Special K, which is they're another team where like they've lost a gimmick and they have no gimmick to replace it. Like, even though I think we both felt like that the Allison Danger stuff and the feuding tag partner stuff went on a little too long, it's like ever since they've lost that, they really don't have any thing to replace it. They don't really have characters now. And
I don't think they have chemistry with each other. I mean, It's not going to be an issue, obviously, going forward, but like, I just don't think they work that well together. I don't think they're like an exciting team. And this is the second time where the ROH has had a tag team champion, like second time in a row, where it's like, this is kind of disappointing. What they are, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But Whitmer, I think, is more interesting when he's doing big moves and taking big moves, not when he's like slowly, methodically getting the heat, which is what he did for a lot of this. They do they do their heel stuff. They draw Nigel off the apron, and Cabana goes to tag him, and he's not there. Eventually, he does double. They work on Cabana for a while, but he does a moonsault press on Moffat Whitmer and gets the hot tag to Nigel. And Nigel does some fun stuff. He does a bunch of shoulder blocks to Moff, but he doesn't go down. So Moff shoulder blocks him, and he does his second ever rebound lariat, but this time from the front. So it is the classic move that he becomes famous for. And actually, it is the best spot of the match to that point. So I enjoyed that. They do a few more things. Whitmer gets a brainbuster on Nigel. Cabana breaks it up. Cabana with a missile drop kick. Whitmer goes for a wrist clutch but Cabana blocks it and turns it into a roll up. And Whitmer blocks the roll up and sits on top of him. But Moff is distracting the ref, and that allows Nigel to come in and reverse Cabana into a roll up, which that's a whole convoluted sequence. But I'd say it was actually one of the more entertaining parts of the match. Cabana goes for the twirly bird again. Whitmer escapes, hits Cabana in the back of the neck, and gets the wrist clutch exploder and gets the win. And the wrist clutch exploder gets a dangerous call, which always feels very random, but Gabe does love saying it for the wrist clutch exploder. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, the final few minutes were okay, but I just thought the match was kind of boring.
I like this a bit better than you, but not a ton. Like, again, just trying to zero in to give some idea of like how I ranking this match. Like, I would probably give it like just a flat 3 stars, which again, when it's Nigel McGuinness and Colt Cabana in a 14-minute match, I think this goes back to the strong homicide match. You kind of want more than just that was kind of decent. That was a little bit better than average. Yeah, I agree with a lot of what you said, though. If I could describe this match, with one word, I would just say mid-tempo. I felt like the whole match was kind of like in second gear, and it never got into first, but it never got into third. It just kind of puttered along at the same pace all the way through. And there were a couple neat spots. It was neat to see another early instance, like you said, of the rebound lariat. I liked when Colt was getting whipped into the corner at one point. Nigel put his body draped it over the corner so that Colt would hit his body and not the turnbuckle, like kind of a padding. And then later on, Moff and Whitmer try and repeat the spot, but Nigel just like kicks the guy that's laying on the turnbuckle. I thought that was a funny, fun little spot. But yeah, there's just something missing. They follow it, they work over Colt's injured neck, which they say Gabe says he got hurt from the Delirious match. And the impression I always got watching Moff and Whitmer was there's few teams or acts in wrestling I could ever think of where I can tell they're working really hard and they're getting so like their entertainment value never matches the effort, because I never feel like these guys are mailing it in. It always feels like they're giving like a 4+ star effort, like they're always trying to have a great match and they're working really hard. But yet so often I would put the matches, their quality wise, is what we're seeing here, which is just like, that was maybe a little better than average. But yet it always feels like they're working really hard. But like maybe it goes to what you said. Maybe they just don't have chemistry with each other. Maybe it's the way their roles. I don't know. But a couple other little quick notes. This is where we start to get sold on commentary that Steve Corino might not be showing up for the main event. Gabe says that this match was originally supposed to be the main event, which I'll say, sure it was, Gabe. But Corino still hasn't showed up. Gabe says he sent a phone message at 7:30, Corino did, to say that he's on the way, but this city really isn't that far away from where Corino it was. And so Gabe already starting to shit on Corino a bit. And then on commentary, Nolte does one of the thing I hate most about Nolte's commentary, which is working against clear storyline points Gabe is trying to put over. Because late in the match, Colt is the isolated guy. He eventually makes the hot tag. And then later on, pretty shortly after Nigel makes the hot tag, like Colt wants to be tagged back in again. And Gabe is trying to say something like, maybe Colt shouldn't have done that. And you can tell Gabe is trying to plant the seeds for dissension, like the idea of like the old Bret Hart, Owen Hart, Royal Rumble 94 thing where, like maybe the injured guy that just got his ass kicked shouldn't be insisting on coming back into the match. And Nolte immediately is just like, nope, I think it was a smart move. Nigel just took some off. And it's like, even I, as the home viewer, know exactly the story Gabe is trying to sell. And Nolte always is like, nope, no, I disagree, Gabe. I think this might actually be different. And you can just tell that Gabe is not into that. But, yeah, I thought a okay match, but this would be Dan Moff's last Ring of Honor match. Obviously, he had a recent little run in Ring of Honor, but this would be his last match for a long time in Ring of Honor, and one of his last matches for 3 years in wrestling. And what happened? They do acknowledge it. Gabe does. In the final segment of the show, they add a little segment where they say Dan Moff's got into a car accident and he has to retire from wrestling.
Which is a really intense way to play it.
Yes, and instead we will tell you what really happened. Obviously, this is a sensitive subject, so much like the Rob Feinstein thing. Excuse us if we're trying to be a little careful here.
It's also subject to a lot of online chatter without any super official confirmation of anything, right? So
exactly, and because of that, I'm not going to go to any of the message board comments I looked up today or anything like that. I'm going to go just through 2 Observer quotes and an official quote from Homicide and leave it at that, and maybe tell you what happened after that. But I'll go first to one quote from the Observer, which was, "It's unclear exactly what the story is with Dan Moff, but he's gone from pro wrestling over a real-life dispute with Homicide. Homicide told independent promoters it's a him or me proposition and says he's the bigger star, and apparently whatever it is Moff did," Homicide claimed it was something to do with his personal life, "was enough that he convinced people he was the one to keep. I have no clue whether this is a legit or an angle since the two started out together." Well, first off, I'll just say, Dave, this was legit because Dan Moff, like when this breaks, it broke at some point between this show and the next show. Dan Moff at that point after the story breaks does not wrestle according to Cage Match for over 3 years. So clearly I would say it was legit. We'll go to another Observer quote from the next issue after, I believe. Dave would then write, "The story on Moff is that Homicide is pissed beyond belief at him for something having to do with their respective personal lives. The exact thing has been kept quiet, but Homicide, who runs in a dangerous crowd, has vowed to hurt Moff if he sees him. Moff being away from wrestling is something he's doing for his own personal safety, because if he shows his face, he's in legit danger. It isn't so much that Homicide pulled rank that promoters have to pick and choose, although he did, as much as it's for Moff's personal safety. He knew it wouldn't be good even if a promoter didn't pick and choose."
You know what that just proves is that Dan Moff shouldn't have broken up his association with Allison Danger, since he could match Danger for Danger. All right, maybe I shouldn't joke about this. I don't know.
No,
time plus tragedy equals, and it's been a long time. So
exactly, and so there was a ton, I remember, of online chat about what this meant. People were crying out. Homicide did give an official on the record statement to a website at the time that was kind of, we've mentioned in the past, they were a bit of a seedy site, but they did have some wrestlers that would talk to them, called the Declaration of Independence website, no longer around.
DOI, I'm sure many of you remember it. If you're listening to this show, you probably know about it.
So Homicide did give an official quote to them, and I'll read it off here. "This is the last time you will hear or see me mentioning that jabroni's name again. Dan Moff is done in the wrestling business. Finished. Moff blackballed himself. I did not blackball Moff. Promoters had to pick me or him, and all the promoters picked me because of what Moff did. There is only one side of the story, and Moff fucked up, and that is why he is done, and no one is using him. Moff fucked with my family and fucked with my personal life. Moff is he's, I won't say the word, he's the thing that Moff, Homicide accuses Moff of being what people accused Rob Feinstein of being. We'll put it that way. He goes, Homicide says, I hope fans can understand this. This shit is personal. This is my life. Moff screwed Moff and blackballed himself because of what he did. No promoter want to use him because of what he did. Moff is done with wrestling. I want everyone to know that I hate Dan Moff and I don't respect him. He's a piece of shit. This is my personal life and the last time I will ever mention this guy's name again. This is done just like Moff's career. I want fans to know the whole story, but this is very personal and that's all I can say. I know fans want to hear that whole interview, but it's better off not being up there because it's real life. Moff is done.
What year was that he gave that interview?
I believe this was just like weeks or days even after the story broke, so 2005.
Gotcha.
And so, obviously there was rumors, the heavy accusations. All I can say is we can say, on the record on a site on a podcast that doesn't want to get sued, that wants to keep being able to serve the country of Denmark. On the record, Moff did not wrestle for 3 years after this. He did come back for JAPW, Jersey All-Pro. He started working in the Northeast. And he's worked, on and off ever since then. And in fact, in the last, I would say 5 years, looking at Cage Match, Moff has started to work before then, there was a time period where he started to work on shows with Homicide again. And then I would say about 5 years ago, he has now worked for a handful of matches where he has been both on the opposite ends of the ring as Homicide and teamed with him. So, as heavy as these insinuations are, they apparently came to some kind of understanding because they have wrestled against each other and together, which is a big difference when you consider that what we're talking about right now is Homicide is reports basically saying that Dan Moff's physical health is in danger if he shows up anywhere Homicide is. So
time plus tragedy also equals comity. COMITY.
Yeah. So, it's just a heavy story, and it was really mysterious at the time because, Dan Moff was one half of the tag champs, and all of a sudden, not only is he done with Ring of Honor, he's done, he was, at this point, the Jersey All-Pro Wrestling, their world champ. They just vacate the title. He doesn't even drop it. He's just gone from all of wrestling. And in fact, ironically, Homicide is the guy that wins the match for the vacant title. So that was also a little interesting thing. But, so just Dan Moff, Matt, do we have any final thoughts on Dan Moff except I thought he was a good, decent wrestler. He had some good moments. I thought he was a little overrated on his promos. They were not as good as I remembered them to be. He kind of overdid the quiet, loud trick where you do a little quiet, then you scream, and then you go back quiet. But, he was a good mid-card hand to have around, I would say. And I don't know if you could say it's a tragedy. If what Homicide accused him of is anywhere close to being true, I don't know if you could say it's a tragedy or sad that he left, but it definitely, it's not a great way to leave wrestling, I guess.
No, it's not a great way to come back. It's not a great way to leave, and also the basic he got into a car crash and he's gone. That's whoa, what a rough way to be written out. That's Poochie style almost, but more violent.
I was about to say Dan Moff died on the way back to his home planet.
Yeah, I mean it was kind of like that, but no, yeah, I mean, I think Moff, when his promos were kept short, were pretty decent. When he would get too much time, they were not. That promo at Bitter Friends, Stiffer Enemies on Low Key is probably the worst promo in ROH history. But he also had some good ones. It's not like it was consistent. Any time where he had to spend too much time on a bus was not great either. But he had some real highlights. That street fight with the Second City Saints was fantastic. Really, really great. I really liked his one match with Samoa Joe for the title. I thought that was a very good match. I thought that in some of the bigger, the bigger embassy matches, he was good. I thought I liked the match where they won the tag team titles, Moff and Whitmer. I know you didn't really love it that much, but I thought it was good. Moff was a pretty good wrestler, and he wasn't the best guy in ROH. I mean, there was lots of fantastic wrestlers in ROH, but he was a solid mid-card hand, like you said. And his character improved, and I think, you could see him improving too. So, I think if they had found the right spot for him, he could have been really good. I don't think they ever totally did, though.
Yeah, I do think there could have been – I don't think he ever would have topped out as close to a main eventer, but I do think, there was something left on the table with him. Like you said, with the right role, he could have been maybe a bit more than he was, maybe an upper mid-carder, maybe more than just this guy in a push tag team that wasn't that over as a tag team. But so yeah, that's Dan Moff's Ring of Honor career, at least for what we'll be covering. Next up was James Gibson defeats Rocky Romero with Homicide and Julius Smokes in his corner via submission in 16 minutes, 55 seconds using the front guillotine choke. there continues to be something about James Gibson where he makes the small things really interesting to me, like the really basic stuff. I'll say off the bat, I thought to some degree this was another match that was good but not great and kind of maybe underachieved a little bit depending on how big a fans you are of these two guys. I would put it as like a 3.5-star match. I thought it was probably the best match of the night so far, but it still wasn't what I would call a great match or a blowaway match. And like a lot of matches on the show, it also didn't really have a story told in the match or really like a really heated feud component. But I did think it was just a lot of really good, well executed technical wrestling. The match did kind of build. It started off pretty slow, but I actually, again, I was surprised how engaged I was by the basic slow early stuff. And I thought they built the match up well. And yeah, I just continue to be really impressed by James Gibson's little things, like his body language. I think you watch his body language; it's really good. There's a lot of wrestlers where you watch them and you feel like they're just going move to move, like mechanically, like you can almost tell that they're thinking in their head as they do one bump, like the bump I've got to do in 20 seconds, where Gibson always feels like he's really in the moment, like he's reacting to what's happening to him in the moment. And his selling continues to be really good. Like there's one move, I forget the exact move, that Romero hits him with, and Gibson does this facial expression where he looks like he's just about to cry. Like he looks like he stepped on a Lego times 20. And it's almost too comical, but it's just the perfect level of not being too comical. It's just so good. And he's full of little moments like that I really like. And he's really good even on just like basic things like vertical suplexes or repeated body slams. He has a really snappy, good execution. Romero, I thought, was pretty good too. I thought in some ways he had a bit of an off night in the sense of some of his big jumping knees and kicks didn't quite look the greatest. There was one jumping knee that looked absolutely brutal and great. Some didn't. He does kind of botch. I don't know if it's his fault or Gibson. I kind of felt like it was his. Rope walk Rana, where it looks like he didn't get his legs around Gibson's head, but Gibson has to take the bump anyway, or at least decided to take the bump anyway. And finally, I felt like the end of the match where Romero is in control, and then Gibson just counters out of nowhere a move with a neck breaker and then immediately slaps on the guillotine choke for the win. I felt like that was a little abrupt, but it does seem like in a couple of these Gibson matches they're kind of trying to sell the idea that like he can get the win with the guillotine out of anywhere, but I still felt like in the flow of this match, the way it was building, it felt kind of like a bit anticlimactic, and especially because there's a move I posted on Twitter a few days ago. What happens a minute earlier, which was to me the coolest move of the whole show, where Romero has Gibson in a standing hammerlock. Gibson leg trips him, like he kind of hooks his leg with his leg and they trip the floor. It's hard to describe. And then they both roll through into a bridging pin while their legs are still tied. And it gets like this big near fall. Like halfway through the move, you can tell the crowd being like, oh shit, this is cool. And I felt like that would have been the perfect finish instead of kind of the anticlimactic guillotine finish. But overall, I thought this was a good match. Again, not a match you have to go out of your way to see, but the best match on the show so far.
Yeah, I would agree with almost all of that. It was I would say it was the best match on the show so far. I thought it was very good, but I really do agree that it peaked a little bit early. I actually think it even peaked before the spot that you said, like the spot that you mentioned, like brought them back up again. But there was a sequence like earlier in the match where, you know, they were doing like they did a double midair crossbody, and they got up and they traded forearms and they bounced off the ropes, and you know and Romero cuts off a forearm with a knee, goes for a knee strike, but then Gibson pops up and does like a fighting spirit clothesline, and they collapse, and you know the Romero does like a Rana takedown into an arm scissors with. Gibson breaks out of it with a power bomb, and Romero does like a sunset flip power bomb. Like I thought, like that whole sequence, the crowd was very up for it, and then they sort of got a little bit quiet after that until that spot that you mentioned with the hammerlock reversal and the roll up. But I thought so. I do think the match peaked a little bit early, and that's really the only nit that I would pick. You know, I mean, I really did enjoy the early. Mat work and stuff, you know, the Gibson slaps and with Romero and got some oohs and ahs. I enjoyed that. A couple of A couple of other notes. So Mark Nolte makes a Dick Vitale reference, which you don't hear too often, saying he doesn't want to be the guy with 14 guys in his top 5 before he compliments Romero as a breakout star of 2005. And I think we can both agree that at least in ROH, Romero was not a breakout star in 2005. I think that one is pretty clear. There's also a moment where Smokes called Gibson a cracker. And, I was like, given the Confederate flags on his trunks, I'm not sure if that was such an inappropriate statement, but everything else Gibson did was great. I agree with you about him. Like he just does the little things so well. His body language, like you mentioned, like the technique, like the way he like floats over into pinning combinations and different things like that. He's just so smooth. This is basically a preview. Like his run is just going to get better and better. He really was a marvel during this whole era. And, sometimes you actually watch this and you wonder, like, where did these guys get so good? Because it's not like he had a chance to get so great in WCW or WWF. It's like, yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to say, he does the little things like a veteran of like a 25-year veteran, but he wasn't that old.
Right.
So I feel the same way as you, exactly.
I guess just on like house shows and stuff, I don't know. The indies and other things before this, I guess I actually haven't gone back and like looked at the history of his career before he went to WCW and the WWF. Did he spend much time in like Japan or Mexico or anything like that? Do you know?
I'm not sure, and quite frankly, it's been so long. I haven't even revisited like the Young Dragon stuff he did in WCW. Like I remember people loving him, but I wonder was he even close to that then? Like this kind of smooth? Because man, that's another thing I should probably revisit. If we had infinite hours and never died, I would definitely do that.
Yeah, because if you look at his cage match, it goes basically from he's in a couple indies in 90. Like he has a match in 97. I guess I'm sure he had other matches that just weren't like recorded, and then you go skip all the way to 99, and he's basically in WCW at this point, and in a few indies, and he's already pretty good. So it's there's really not a lot of readily available history. He looks like he spent a lot of time in like HWA after WCW folded. Maybe that's where he got a lot of ring time. But it's just interesting because he's so good. He's such a good wrestler, and it's just I guess part of it's just talent.
Some people just get it easier. They just pick up things or get details that others don't, I guess.
He did have a run in New Japan in 2004, which I'm sure helped a lot. But it's not like he spent so much time there.
No. Couple other things quick from this match. Did you notice, Matt, that Julius Smokes kept motioning like multiple times for someone to come out from the back, to the point that at one point Gabe mentions it on a commentary and no one ever comes out? Like there are multiple times he like waves to the curtain like, come on out, like someone better come out here, and no one does.
I wonder if that's just a bit, like he's so desperate that he wants people to come out and help him, but there's no one to come out and help.
Yeah, and the other thing I liked was there's a point where Romero takes a tope from Gibson fairly early in the match, and Smokes like immediately is like spraying Romero's back with water, like wearing with a spray bottle. And it was just how it was he was so quick to do it. It just made me laugh. Like the hilarity of like taking a move that like dramatic and then like seconds later having like water sprayed on you like that. That's such a weird idea for me. Like for some reason that just tickled me in some weird way. I don't know why that was so amusing to me, but it probably
tickled Romero a little bit too.
I don't even like getting water sprayed on me when I'm doing nothing, Matt. That's why I haven't had a shower in 18 years. But let alone after.
But you do put salt in your mouth after you've already swallowed the food. That is the thing you do.
An hour after I walk in the ring, I put soap on my dry skin. I'm like, this will catch up. The suns will come eventually. So after the match, the Rottweilers, they have a tantrum on the outside. They grab chairs. Gibson grabs a chair and stays in the ring holding it. He kind of stares them down from in the ring, and the Rottweilers eventually leave, at which point Gary Michael Capetta makes his way back out to the ring. Gibson gets a surprisingly, I would say, like big and sustained round of applause from the fans at this point. They're really into him. Capetta says, as a result of that win, Gibson has won a Ring of Honor World title shot at their next Ring of Honor show in Massachusetts. Gibson says this is a dream come true, and Ring of Honor and their fans have given him a second chance. At this point, Roderick Strong and Jack Evans run in to beat down Gibson. The crowd immediately chants for Spanky. So again, this crowd really knew what the storylines were at this point, although I guess they kind of showed you their connection earlier with that other Gary promo. But Spanky quickly comes out to make the save. When things have settled down, Spanky grabs the mic and he congratulates Jamie Noble. And no one notices for like a couple seconds, and then you hear some fan in the crowd shout, James Gibson! And you can see Spanky like cringe and the crowd laugh when he realizes, everyone kind of realizes, oh, yeah, he said the wrong name of his supposed great friend, James Gibson. So Spanky corrects himself. Gets a nice little crowd reaction. Spanky says he hopes Gibson wins the title, and when he does, he wants to be the first guy to challenge him for it. They shake hands. So, yeah, another one of these kind of frenemy storylines where Spanky keeps kind of getting shown up by Gibson, but he's still being a good guy at this point. He's still, respectful, being like, I'm hoping you do well, buddy. But so next up, we go to backstage. Special K is goofing off, and Lacey is pissed, but not that. I guess I can't call him Special K anymore. Oh, thank God they're going to be Lacey's Angels soon. So anyway, the formerly known Special K is goofing off. Lacey is pissed, but not that pissed, because she's got an idea for a new merchandising brand, Lacey's Angels. Someone in the group says, like Charlie's Angels? And they then do the old Charlie's Angels pose. And so, Matt, I just wrote in my notes. So to sum up, after the match where two teams fought over the rights to the Special K name, the winner said, we don't want it, and the loser said, whatever, we got a new, better idea anyway.
Yeah, I know. So, honestly, both reactions are completely rational.
Yeah, exactly. But it still is one of those Ring of Honor gimmicks where, like, the stipulation gets awarded, and then instantly it is like the meaning of it is negated. Like, turns out no one wanted or needed this name that they were fighting over.
ROH is a lot more like WWE than they let on.
Before the main event, CM Punk makes his way to the ring to a big crowd reaction for his entrance, and Punk then has some explaining to do. He gets on the mic and he tells us that his supposed good friend, Steve Corino, isn't here tonight. Punk says he's disappointed because tonight he's up against the Pure Champ and Samoa Joe. Colt Cabana has already wrestled twice tonight and has a bad neck. Ace Steel Singh at home in Chicago, and so Punk needs a partner. He says for anybody to be his tag partner tonight. Out comes Spanky, who grabs the mic and says he's sure everyone is sick of hearing his voice right now, but tonight the winner of this match gets a shot at the tag titles, and Spanky is here in Ring of Honor for titles. They shake hands once, and then in a funny little move, Spanky pulls away and then rears back and does the Macho Man to Hogan Mega Powers handshake, where they really overset the exact same handshake, and I thought that was cute. And then we have a team and not an impromptu. I mean, this was so the original main event for the show was supposed to be Jay Lethal and Samoa Joe versus CM Punk and Steve Corino. Winners get a tag title shot on the next show. Instead, we get Jay Lethal and Samoa Joe defeating CM Punk and Spanky in 25 minutes, 59 seconds, when Lethal pins CM Punk after a Stevie Richards super kick and dragon suplex. Yes, you heard that right. A Stevie Richards super kick, not someone doing a Stevie Richards-esque super kick. Stevie Richards come out. He hits the super kick. So we'll get to that, I guess, after we talk about the match. I think the first thing we should do, Matt, is we'll talk about Corino for a second. Then you can talk about the match. I'll talk about the match. And then we can talk about Richards since that happens at the end. So this definitely felt like, having rewatched the show, so this was going to be the show where they had Corino and Punk break up because they teased a breakup on the last show, but did the kind of thing where they almost break up and then they smooth it over. They obviously have been building up for months now, basically ever since Corino came back. The idea of Corino and Punk being these kind of guys that are friends and they're teaming together, but also they kind of are bad-mouthing each other immediately when each guy leaves the room, and they are kind of really annoyed by each other. And so, for some reason, the show, Steve Corino just isn't on the show. And so I tried to do a bunch of research and was having a hard time because, like I said before, The Observer, for some reason, does not cover this show. And in fact, the only quote I could find from The Observer about this was Dave writing the week after the show happened, as expected, stemming from his showing up late for last week's show and then walking out. Steve Corino is on the outs with Ring of Honor for now, but except Dave never reported on him walking out to begin with, the best I can tell. But so at least we know that. We know Corino showed up and we know he walked out. We do also know that on the Ring of Honor Newswire after the show on March 17th, they wrote on the Newswire, Steve Corino and Ring of Honor have parted ways. Ring of Honor would like to thank Mr. Corino for his invaluable contributions throughout the years. Well, they almost said through the years, Matt. But anyway, then the PW Torch wrote, regarding why Steve Corino was taken off the Ring of Honor card after being advertised for the main event, Sapolsky said, no comment. So I couldn't find anywhere that mentioned this. So I finally desperately a few days ago on Twitter wrote, does anyone have any information? And former guest of the show, good guy Joe Spostu, gave us the incredible recommendation of, why don't you just ask Steve Corino on Twitter? Which I thought, well, I'll probably annoy him. I've never had an interaction with Steve Corino in my life. I'll do it. Matt, within minutes, I got a reply. So I will read that off now. Steve Corino tweeted, I was mad at Gabe and probably being unprofessional. Mostly mad at Gabe. And Brian Regal, his personal ring announcer at this point, who was reading off the long ring introductions, replied to Steve saying, that was a long-ass drive and we were only at the building for 2 minutes. So I don't know, Gabe, we mentioned earlier on the show, Gabe mentioned during commentary, it's 7:30 and Corino hasn't showed up yet. We do know his students were there for the second match. So I assume his students then showed up earlier. I don't know, whatever happened, whether Corino showed up late and Gabe got angry or the two got mad or whatever. All we know from the stories is Corino did show up for the show and they had some kind of argument, I guess, and they left within 2 minutes and then the card got changed and Corino did not show up for months and months. He does come back during the Gabe era, but not for months. So
he comes back in 2005.
Yeah. So. Yeah. And this is the end. Like you were talking to me, I think on the last show and between shows online, like there's a lot of like aborted angles in Ring of Honor at this time. And this is the end. They spent months kind of building up this Corino Punk feud and it just kind of like, like another Corino feud, the old Corino's group versus Christopher Daniels Prophecy feud. It kind of ends with Corino leaving before it even really gets rolling. And yeah. I don't know if it's the hugest loss. I don't know how good it would have been.
Well, remember, Punk's not going to be around for much longer anyway, and he's he's in that embassy feud. So,
but either way, that's not the match we got. We got a different kind of match. So, Matt, what do you think about this? Obviously, a lot of big names, and I believe at least not in wrestling in general, but in Ring of Honor, I think one of the big selling points of this match was it's the first time Punk and Joe were in the same ring together since their Joe versus Punk 3. That was probably 3 or 4 months earlier. So what'd you think about the match?
Yeah, and it's also Jay Lethal's first main event. Unless you count that scramble cage thing from the year before, I guess. But I like this a lot. I thought it was. I would compare this match to like peanut butter and jelly, but like if you had it the normal way, where you made a sandwich out of it, put it all together, everything working together.
This was like you made a sandwich with those jars that have the peanut butter and jelly striped together, so you don't have to do the work.
Yeah. Sure. But no, I thought Jay Lethal looked great in this match. I really, really did. I thought, he really turned it on. I also enjoyed at the beginning of the match where Gabe asked Mark Nolte if he had any leads on who attacked Jay Lethal the week before, and Mark got all indignant and was like, "What do I look like, a character on Law and Order?" Like they are breaking apart at the seams, just like you would not believe.
One show left.
Yeah. Gabe also says that because Punk chased away the embassy, they all fled back to Ghana, and Nana has them all holed up in his palace, and he has the Ghana army stationed outside the palace just in case CM Punk shows up. It got me wondering. I wonder if that's what the all of the fencing and security at the U.S. Capitol is for now too, just in case CM Punk shows up and tries to get in there.
Well, he's a fan of pipe bombs, Matt.
Jeez. Wow, I did not see that coming. But good job. No, I thought like Punk and Lethal had this wrestling sequence at the beginning of the match where they did all these fast-paced reversals, and Punk went for a Shining Wizard and Lethal caught it and turned it into a jackknife pin, and I thought it was really, really good. It went on for a while. It was fast-paced. It was crisp. I was very impressed, not just with Lethal there, but actually with Punk, because that's not the sort of thing you see Punk doing very often, especially back then. And I thought they both held up really well. That was just very impressive. like it was almost something you'd expect, like, I don't know, like Loki and Bryan Danielson to have done a few years earlier. Like, just not something you'd necessarily expect from Punk and Lethal, and I thought they did a good job. I also thought that that Spanky was a lot of fun here. At the beginning of the match, when he tags in against Lethal, the crowd starts chanting for Joe, so Spanky gets them to chant for Lethal instead to discourage him from tagging Joe. I thought that was a cute spot. I thought this just a lot of good stuff. Like Punk and Joe face off, and the crowd goes nuts, and Punk goes right back to the headlocks. And, like, that's a fun callback. So Joe comes back and wails at him with face slaps, but misses a spinning slap. So Punk immediately gets another headlock takedown, and this time gets him. Like, they're very fun to watch against each other. Like, there's another spot where Spanky and Punk take down Joe and celebrate, but Joe pops up behind them and just knocks them both down with the shoulder block. They also have a moment on commentary where they make very clear that this was recorded weeks later, because they talk about the Best of American Super Juniors tournament, and Gabe, being Gabe, goes, "I don't see what can go wrong in this tournament. This tournament's going to be awesome." And so, like,
I knows that too.
Yeah, clearly this was recorded after that, which we'll have plenty of time to talk about. Oh man, will that next show be interesting? But Lethal has another good exchange with Spanky. Spanky hits a great drop kick, and Lethal comes back with this, like, interesting, like, whipping backbreaker thingy that he does. Lethal hits a really high angle back suplex on Spanky that causes Gabe to almost, like, gasp, just way on the back of his head. Joe and Lethal briefly get to work over Spanky for a while, but really most of the match is Spanky and Punk getting the heat on Lethal. They work over Lethal's ribs. Punk even does an abdominal stretch, and even though they're not, like, being total heels, they do this spot where, like, the heel abdominal stretch spot where, like, behind the ref's back they clasp hands when the abdominal stretch is in, and Gabe is very upset by that. Way more upset than he is whenever Moff and Whitmer attack somebody before the bell for some reason. But yeah, so they get the heat on Lethal for a while. Eventually, Lethal throws Spanky off in a sliced bread attempt. He drop kicks Punk on the apron, and he slowly, while selling his ribs, gets over and tags in Joe. And Joe, of course, is on fire. Over the head, belly to belly on Punk. Power slam into an arm breaker on Spanky. Power bomb into the STF on Spanky. And pulls him back into the center of the ring, and then pulls Spanky back so far in the STF that Spanky has to bite Joe in the hand to get it released. Lethal comes back, diving headbutt. Punk breaks that up, diving from outside the ring. And I thought it was a really good, like, pinfall save there, because Lethal's about to pin Spanky after the headbutt, and Punk is on the floor, and he dives from the floor onto the apron, through the bottom rope, and onto Lethal, like, across the ring to break it up. Like a really good last-second pin save. At that moment, Nolte says that Lethal should make the tag, because his thing that he does is always criticizing whatever the wrestler is doing. That's just Nolte's whole thing. Yeah. Spanky does a cool move. He does a swinging DDT on Lethal while drop kicking Joe. Then he tags in Punk. They actually do a really cool double team themselves, because, like, Spanky does a flatliner on Lethal while Punk does an enziguri on him simultaneously, and the crowd pops big for him kicking out of that. Eventually, though, Punk and Spanky overwhelm Lethal, and Punk escapes a dragon suplex, hits a bridge and German suplex. Joe breaks that up, and Joe and Punk are back in the center trading forearms. And Joe ducks a Punk clothesline and immediately does a tope onto Spanky. Then Punk and Lethal are in the ring. Punk goes for the Pepsi plunge, and then Stevie Richards appears on the apron. He comes on the apron, and Gabe won't say his name. He does one of those, he doesn't work here, like he's Lex Luger and at Nitro, like one of those for Stevie Richards. So Punk goes to hit him. He ducks. He hits Punk with the Stevie kick. The announcers are very confused. 16 years later, I am very confused.
Matt, I did research and I'm still kind of confused.
Yeah. So Lethal is back in the ring. He goes for the dragon. Punk fights it, but eventually Lethal hits it and pins him. Spanky tries to save, but Joe holds him back. I like this a lot, like a lot, a lot, a lot. I thought it was a lot of fun. I thought Lethal looked great, but that finish, come on. Like, that was very unsatisfying. Like, Stevie Richards, I mean, I like Stevie Richards, but what?
So I like this match less than you, like not a little. I thought this was the match of the show, but by match of the show, I would say like 3.5 stars. Like
I'd go four and a quarter.
yeah, see, I like this. I thought this was another match which, like, if I could rename the show, I would not be back to basics. It would be wrestlers I really like having perfectly like middle of the road matches. That's a lot more unwieldy of and long of a show name and maybe not as enticing, but I thought everyone here did work really well. Like, although Joe actually didn't wrestle that much in this match, it was, like you said, it was more Jay Lethal and versus Spanky and Punk. I liked it. The problem I felt like was one. I haven't loved every part of the Spanky Punk. I mean the Corino Punk storyline, but I felt like with Spanky in there wasn't a lot of like kind of storyline emotional juice to this match. It was just guys wrestling, but wrestling very well. But at the same time, the one time it felt special was when Punk and Joe were in the ring together, which they didn't do a ton together, but they did have that one long sequence. And I agree, that felt special and really cool. I love that Punk went back to the headlocks and Joe kept avoiding them. And finally near the end, he got like one really decent length, like hard headlock in there.
It was kind of the model they used for Joe and Loki, where they would like, people want to see it again, so they just tease it, and like they just give you just enough that you want more.
Obviously, like CM Punk had a really good career after this, and Joe had some real big highlights in TNA after this, and even some in Ring of Honor, obviously. But one of I felt this way before, but watching that sequence especially, I had this huge regret. Like, I really am bummed that Punk and Joe did not wrestle in the same company for like another 10 years, because I really feel like they should have been one of those eternal rivalries, like, I don't know, Masawa and Kawada, or like Austin Rock, or even though theirs wasn't that long either, but like,
yeah, well, and they never wrestled in the same company ever again.
Yeah. Like, I would have loved if they had been together for like a decade, and it's one of those things where like every couple years they meet up again. You just know, and whenever they do, it feels special. Because I really do think the magic these guys had, at least in Ring of Honor, it really could have felt special. Like, I feel like these guys are smart enough; they could have kept finding new wrinkles to it, and instead, this is kind of, they're gonna have another match together in Ring of Honor later in Punk's run here, but really, it's kind of the end for them already, and that's sad when you think about how much these guys had to give still, I feel like, and how great they were together. But I agree, Jay Lethal looked really good. I really thought it was interesting the way Spanky has worked Samoa Joe in this match and in the Trios tournament match where they faced off, because like most guys that wrestle Joe, they sell for him big, they let Joe kick their ass because Joe's got this big ass-kicking guy. But Spanky wrestles Joe like he's Yokozuna. Like, Spanky tries to lift Joe for a suplex and he can't. He does shoulder blocks and just bounces off of Joe until he does a double one with Punk. Like, I really think it's interesting that Spanky has decided, like, I'm going to be the guy that wrestles Joe like he's like the completely immovable object, where other guys will be like, oh, I'll lift up Joe, I'll, hit him real hard and make him bounce across the ring. And Spanky's the guy who's like going to wrestle him like he's Ray wrestling the Great Khali, which it is entertaining. It's an interesting choice that he's making there. And so I thought that was neat. And it's a kind of a shame. I feel like those two, I don't think ever really had a singles match. I enjoyed the match, but I just, for some reason, I'll tell you what it was, Matt. I felt like this show needed one match where they kind of like went kind of crazy and just went over the top and did those this show needed one match that did the thing that people that would call down Ring of Honor in this era, what they would call it down for, which is the idea of the match that kind of got overindulgent and did like a final 5 minutes of just crazy near falls and big moves. I felt like the show needed just one match like that, because the show was in a way kind of reserved, and I felt like they were starting to get really hot, like they were really starting to peak at a new level. And then Stevie Richards comes out and does the super kick, and then that's the end of the match. And in a way, maybe that made my review of the match a little harsher because it left kind of a sour taste in my mouth, where I'm not a person against interference or even fuck finishes at the end of matches, but I felt like this was a time where the match was just like reaching maybe a level where I would have liked it as much as you. And then Stevie Richards comes out and hits a super kick.
It's a finish probably makes it more in the 4-star range, but I thought it was very much for me headed toward that 4.25 range.
And I just didn't quite like it as much. Although, again, cool moments. There's like a backbreaker where Lethal just kind of grabs Spanky from behind and basically like kind of pulls him onto his knees in a backbreaker as he himself falls onto his back, but it's not a lung blower. I thought that was cool. And like you said, there was that scary moment where Spanky takes like a backdrop suplex from Jay Lethal, and it looks like he just shifted his weight at the very last minute to not break his neck, which scary, but also knowing that he was okay, cool. Maybe the one match we've had a serious disagreement on this show, even then it's not that much of a disagreement, still, in my opinion, the best match of the show. So let's get to what the hell, why was Stevie Richards on the show? I tried to investigate, Matt. I don't know how many answers I got. So first off, let's mention, it stuck in my memory so badly that when you mentioned on the last show, alluded to this at the end of the last show, I did not know what this was. And you were like, oh, you'll remember. And then I did. But like, I didn't even remember this. But then when I started thinking about and researching it, this was a big deal at the time. Because for those who don't remember, Stevie Richards was still employed in WWE at this point. He wasn't doing much, but this was a WWE contracted wrestler appearing in the main event of a Ring of Honor show, which at the time didn't happen. It was pretty crazy. On top of that, this was supposed to be a longer term thing at least, because according to going to the Ring of Honor Newswire at the time, March 14th, they wrote on their website, no one knows why Stevie Richards went after CM Punk last Saturday. The only thing that Richards told ROH officials is that he will be back. We aren't sure why, especially since Richards is under WWE contract. We will find out when Richards returns to Ring of Honor later this week right here in the Newswire. And then later on, PW Insider wrote, WWE Steven Richards is now questionable to appear on the April 2nd Ring of Honor debut in Ashbury Park, New Jersey, as it's the day before WrestleMania 21, and WWE likes to have all the talent in town the entire week at the pay-per-view. He's still booked for April 16th in Boston and May 7th in Manhattan in Ring of Honor's New York City Manhattan debut. So Matt, my memory is horrible, but if I remember correctly, confirm this for me, Stevie Richards doesn't show up again in Ring of Honor in this era, right?
At least not on DVD, he doesn't.
So that's the first mystery, which I'll get to in a second. Then one more quote. Well, actually, I'll get to that. I'll get to it right now, actually. So I couldn't find anything really about it, so I listened to our friends at the Unhonorable Mention podcast, Jeff Schwartz and Shane Hagedorn. They have already covered Back to Basics, so if you want another 3 hours talking about this show, or 2 hours or whatever it was, check that out. And they did have something to say near the end. Shane Hagedorn, of course, worked for Ring of Honor. He was one of the people filming the show. His recollection was, and it sounded like it was just his memories, but that Stevie actually worked with the Ring of Honor students at some time, either shortly before or after this appearance. And he did remember what PW Insider reported, which is that he was supposedly going to be booked on 2 or 3 upcoming shows at the very least. And then he didn't. And I believe Hagedorn's best memory was that for some reason when the word Ring of Honor's, a pseudo announcement that he was going to be working future shows, WWE didn't like that, and then pulled that the word got out, and they pulled him from all their shows. Which sounds weird because why wouldn't you be allowed to announce it if they're letting you do it? But either way, I can go to a quote from the PW Torch, where Gabe on this match says, Samoa Joe, Jay Lethal, Spanky, and CM Punk deserve all the credit in the world with that main event. They basically saw how great the crowd was and that we wanted to build the market, so they were determined to deliver with a great main event. It was a prime example of the wrestlers feeding off the fans. The Woodbridge fans wanted to get lost in the show and not sit there and be smart marky about everything. Gabe's still going after the fans or try to get themselves over, and that just drives the wrestlers to work harder in the ring. It is just great to see that when everything comes together like that. So if I remember correctly, Gabe has another quote. Let me just see if I can just find it here. Let me find it. All right, this is the quote for Gabe on Stevie Richards. The Torch wrote, WWE contracted wrestler Stevie Richards made his Ring of Honor debut on Saturday's Ring of Honor live event in Woodbridge, Connecticut. Ring of Honor promoter Gabe Sapolsky isn't revealing how that deal came about. Quote, I don't really want to get into details of the hows and whys, as it's not right to make any kind of a deal and then go running your mouth about it, he tells The Torch. But I do want to thank the WWE office for letting Stevie do some dates for us. It is a class thing for WWE to do. Vince McMahon said, I think it was on the ECW DVD, that he wants to help out the entire business, and this is an example of WWE doing that. Matt, I'm not blaming Gabe. I told you this earlier in private. I'm not blaming Gabe for praising WWE, especially when they do you a favor and let a guy come on the show. I do have to say the idea that Stevie Richards appearing on a Ring of Honor show and then not being allowed to work there ever again is proof that Vince McMahon wants all of wrestling to succeed, when I think we have a pretty clear track record of the opposite being true. Well, let me put it this way. I believe Vince McMahon wants all wrestling to succeed. I think Vince McMahon also wants to own all wrestling. I think he wants all wrestling to succeed as long as it's all his.
That's right. And also, don't call it wrestling.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, this almost feels like one of those things where Vince McMahon probably didn't even know about it. Like, exactly. Yeah, like, I mean, I don't know that's true, but like, none of this answers my question, which is why? Like, why did they decide, like, okay, we're gonna get Stevie Richards in for a couple dates and immediately have him be involved in our main event with CM Punk, who already has supposedly 2 other feuds going on? It's like, why? Like, and I like Stevie Richards, but like, this almost feels like a little bit of Gabe being like, well, I like ECW. Let's do more things that reference that. Like, I mean, I'm sure Gabe can answer the question, but do you feel like there's much of an upside, even if everything worked out perfectly, bringing in Stevie Richards and putting him in any sort of even short-term program with a main eventer?
I felt I remember the night of, even though I didn't remember this when you mentioned it last time, I remembered the night of, or the week of, the message boards were a buzz, but I think it was less that Stevie Richards is in Ring of Honor and more a WWE contracted wrestler is working for Ring of Honor. And I think actually that buzz would have worn off, and then we would have been left with the idea of, do people really want to see like Stevie Richards versus CM Punk or Stevie Richards versus Samoa Joe? And I don't think they would have. I don't think they would have been disinterested, but I don't think those would have been like heavy DVD sellers. Not
any more than like those guys versus people that they were already feuding with in ROH anyway. Like, but this is just another example. I mean, so many things in early 2005 just did not pan out. You got the Foley Joe thing. Now you got Corino. Now you got Stevie Richards. Even something like the Vordell Walker push, like, right? Like that was a thing that went nowhere. It's interesting. It's interesting that they started so many things that they didn't or couldn't finish. I mean, and then 2005 works out great. Like, it's like the stuff that ends up happening, I'm sure, is better than the stuff that they wanted to do. But still, it's unusual.
So my gut reaction to why Richards was booked before I did the research and stuff was just like, oh, it's the classic Booker philosophy of, if you have to make a change on a major match on the show, you give the fans an even bigger surprise to like make it up to them. Like, almost remember the story of Joe Punk 2 was supposed to be Corino versus Samoa Joe for the world title. And when Corino said like a week before he couldn't work the show, Gabe's thought was, we have to have something even bigger so we don't let the fans down. Like, we have to reward them for the change in the card. But then I don't think that makes sense, because according to, all the reporting, Corino, was like, it sounds like he was just late and had an argument. Like, they were expecting him to show up, and he in fact did show up at the building and then left immediately. And, if Richards really was working with the students possibly before the show and all that, like, this was, and they had more dates booked for him, this was obviously something planned. And like you said, I don't know how it makes sense when Punk already on the books before the show had a feud with Corino that was looked to be about to start. He had a feud with Jimmy Rave. He was going to have a third feud with Stevie and Richards. Like, it's boggled. I don't get it. I would love to know what the thought process was, but
well, I don't send Stevie Richards a tweet.
Okay, but I don't have Matt. I don't have the guts to do that twice in a week. But so that was the final match, but we still had a little bit to go. Oh, one other note. The Pro Wrestling Torch also wrote that Samoa Joe suffered a nasty cut above his left eye, which was visibly swollen while brawling through the crowd with Spanky last Saturday during the main event. So that's something we never see, I believe, because Spanky and Joe brawling happens like right at the end of the match. That's what distracts the ref and lets Stevie hit the super kick. So apparently he cut and swolled up his eye after during that brawl, which is sad, but we go back to Colt Cabana backstage. He is selling his neck from the 2 matches tonight. He says he has a contractual obligation to finish Good Times, Great Memories with Dunn and Marcos. Dunn at this point is wearing glasses, which for some reason just was a big deal to me. It was like a dramatic new character development in the world of Dunn and Marcos. The Ring Crew Express celebrate that they won tonight when Nigel McGuinness interrupts Colt's show again. Nigel's annoyed that Colt isn't taking things seriously, and he thinks maybe they shouldn't be a tag team anymore. And Colt is meanwhile frustrated that Nigel's saying that and getting mad at him, and he says he's not happy with Nigel's, quote, British mentality. So it looks like the incredible 2 or 3 match tenure of Nigel McGuinness and Colt Cabana is breaking up, Matt. Which
leads to a feud that's probably better. So.
Yes, exactly. I'm not arguing against the feud, but very quick breakup, which is fine. We then get a video highlight package called The Rise and Fall of Special K, which shows their highlights from their entire run. We even get some of that original Ring of Honor techno music, which I loved hearing. It was like visiting an old friend, Matt. And then I believe this is going to be the graphic for the show just because it amused me. They have a graphic. I don't know why I was so amused by it, but at the very end of this highlight clip, they have like a freeze frame of a picture of Special K from the early days. And it says Special K 2002 to 2005. Like they're like a deceased person at the Oscars, and I just started laughing when I saw it, and that is the image for this show.
Well, I will say this: Special K never came back. Most things in wrestling they retread. No Special K, and this is 16 years later. I mean, I have a feeling it will come back at some point, just because everything does. But 16 years—that's a long time.
I'm sure there have been unofficial like reunions on indie shows and stuff, but okay, here's a question for you, Matt. Like, could you Special K was a gimmick all based around like raver culture? Are raves still a big deal now? I mean, I guess nothing is a big deal right now at this moment, but like what would be the 2021 equivalent of a Special K gimmick?
Yeah, if you go to a rave now, they're full of Karens,
Would it just be like a group of wrestlers listening to Joe Rogan and doing DMT or something? Like I don't know what the equivalent of Special K is today.
I'm pretty sure raves are still things that young people go to. I don't think that rave culture was at its peak even in 2005. I found a clip a few years ago of Joe Biden going on about raves in Congress in 1994, 1995. I don't know what the peak of rave culture was, but I very much remember that MTV would cover Woodstock 94. And they would talk, they would show overnight, everyone would go to the rave at in one of the tents, and it was so. Raves were things that I feel like 1994. Again, none of this stuff was something that I was ever involved in, so I don't really know. I think there are still raves, but now they would do Molly, because that was, I don't think, a thing in 2005. It was ecstasy, right? So
that would have been Becky Bayless's ring name.
Yeah. Definitely. There would have been a woman character named Molly for sure.
Yeah.
I'm sure the DMT would be the name of some move. All the new drugs that I don't know anything about. I don't know anything about the old drugs either, for the record. But.
Matt Feuerstein, straight-laced.
That's actually true. I'm a total nerd.
So we follow up finally with clips of Dan Moff wrestling Samoa Joe from years ago. Gabe says we have late-breaking and tragic news. Dan Moff has been involved in a car accident in the last week and has suffered injuries that will require him to retire from the pro wrestling business. Very abrupt, very quick, clearly added on at the last minute. We got to explain this moment. And like you said earlier, very severe language, tragic news, require him to retire. I don't know why I'm laughing, but just
it's so ridiculous because it didn't actually happen, and it's so absurd.
Yeah, it's just And that is literally also how the show ends, by the way. That is the last segment you see on this show. So
they're just like, uh-oh, he died. Bye. Like
like we said earlier, like Poochie died, like Dan Moff died on his way back to planet Avoid Homicidia, like something like that. That's the end of it.
I think Dan Moff went to a moat in Ghana. Went to a palace in Ghana, and they built a moat, and they put the Ghana army in front of it, so Homicide wouldn't get in.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So Matt, before we get to our opinions on the show, let's kind of bookend it with Gabe Sapolsky comments, because I kind of mentioned what he said originally at the start of the show, but I didn't say all of his comments. So we'll go back to what Sapolsky told the Torch after the event. Gabe wrote, "The Woodbridge, Connecticut show will go down as one of my favorite ever Ring of Honor shows," he tells the Torch. "I was just so happy with all the matches from top to bottom. It will actually go down as an important night in Ring of Honor history. James Gibson and Spanky are both now established as main eventers and true Ring of Honor guys. Roderick Strong and Rocky Romero had their breakout singles matches. We started the Stevie Richards angle, which has people talking. We saw the death of the stale Special K gimmick as all those guys stepped it up and will now be going in a new direction. The women stepped it up for the first time on the East Coast and proved that women's wrestling has a place in Ring of Honor. We also had a great crowd. Entering the show, we had no intentions of going back to Woodbridge, but the crowd was so good that during the show, we booked a return date. It is an example of people supporting the product and us responding by going back. These were fans that came to have fun and enjoy things instead of sitting there and waiting for spots or overanalyzing everything, so they made us want to go back for more shows. It was just a great night." Gabe says that new tag champs will be crowned on the next show, and Dan Moff will be missed. Matt, I don't agree. I don't agree with a lot of what Gabe said about the show. I did not hate the show, but I thought this was one of the most average, middle-of-the-road B-show-ass B-shows we have seen so far from Ring of Honor. It was a lot of really good wrestlers having really basic 3.25-star matches. Even the angles, like knowing that, like the Stevie Richards thing, which you could argue is the most noteworthy thing on the show, does not go anywhere. It feels like a very inconsequential show, and not a show I think even at the time I would have thought of to be one of the best shows this company has done in 61 shows. But, I mean, what do you think?
Because I like the main event so much, I thought it was better than you thought it was, like probably significantly. Like, I thought it was a solid, but definitely basic show, like definitely back to basics. But yeah, no, not even close to one of the best shows I've ever done. Like, you know, even a lot of the stuff that you said, Gabe, that you cited by Gabe, you know, the stuff that really made him proud of the show, doesn't really hold up in retrospect. You know, like the Special K guys going in a new direction. You know, not really. They don't really. You know, the women step. You know, like really, the women's wrestling division, you know, really never gets going in ROH, but it's a long time before it even, you know, they don't really have many women's matches at all for a while after this. So that doesn't really portend for good things. The Stevie Richards thing goes nowhere.
Strong and Romero, I don't think anyone thinks of their matches on this show as their breakout matches.
No, certainly not at all. So really this is on the strength of a couple things. Like that I thought the show was pretty solid. Which is, I like the main event a lot. I thought the Special K match is like a fun kind of novelty for those guys. I thought they did a good job. And James Gibson looked really good. Other than that, yeah, not much to this show. I definitely thought it was better than the Trios tournament by like a significant degree. And maybe better than It All Begins, but definitely worse than all the rest of the shows in 2005 so far.
I guess the best way to put it is, I would say for most, it's not a terrible show to watch, but I wouldn't recommend it, except if you're really big, like into the history of Ring of Honor. Like, I think the word you use, which is perfect, is it's a novelty. Like, how many Ring of Honor shows do you see something like Stevie Richards running in a thing that never gets followed up on, or a guy no-show the main event, basically, or even all the different matches we said on the first 4 matches where guys were kind of playing against type. Like, it is definitely a show, if you watch all the shows, there's kind of a neat little aspect of just, there's a lot of weird things on this show, like weird little, or even knowing you're watching the last Dan Moff match because Homicide scares him away from wrestling for 3 years. Like, it's definitely a interesting show. I think it's more interesting than good.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
But that brings us to the end of the show.
By the way, before you end, before the next show, we have to figure out how to say "have a good time, have a great time" in Danish. I looked it up in Google Translate, but I don't want to say it because I might pronounce it wrong and then offend our Danish listeners.
Matt, that's perfect, because if a Danish listener wants to give us the phonetic spelling for "have a good time, have a great time" in Danish, they can contact us at ThROH@gmail.com. That's THROH for through, at Trevor Dame on Twitter, and that's DAM as in Mother E, at Mayor MGF. Again there. We have a thread on the Pro Wrestling Only Forums plug section. So, any way you want to get in contact us and let us know about that, we'll be happy to hear it, and we'll work that in. Next time, we will be covering, if you just want to talk about interesting shows, Matt, the next show we will be covering, the next show on the calendar, Best of the American Super Juniors. That is a Ring of Honor show with a one-night tournament where the winner supposedly gets to go to the real Best of the Super Juniors tournament. There's also a Austin Aries homicide match. Jimmy Ray saws off a CM Punk stomach tattoo with a cheese grater. It is the final show for Mark Nolte. There is a ton to discuss, crazy things in and out of the ring, and insane kind of stuff. Like if you thought this show had weird stuff to talk about, that next show, so many weird stories. It's going to be jam packed.
And Joe Gagne.
Well, don't let that discourage you from listening. The other stuff will make Joe Gagne worth it. So you put up with Joe Gagne to get the good stuff. I mean, plus I hear that Spanky American Dragon match is real good. So, that's going to be a really fun show. I'm really looking forward to that one. And so until next time, have a good time. Have a great time.